Hello and welcome to episode 100 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me, as always, is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How you doing?
Not bad, you?
Yeah, I'm good. Episode 100.
Woo!
Back when didn't think we'd get here. Didn't really think about it, to be honest. But it's good. I want to thank everyone who's been with us, basically, whether it's 1 week or the whole time. Particularly the Patreon supporters. It does make a difference. There's there are costs involved in running these the podcasts, and the way we do it, which is kind of designed to make sure it's all safe with hosting and everything else like that as well, and trying to get to some events and talk to people. It's always useful, and funding a few of the giveaways we do as well. So it's all good. So big thank you to you all. And I thank you for Element Games as well for being our sponsor for a period of that.
How long have Element Games been the sponsor for? It seems like forever.
It's at least a couple of years, I think. I would have to go back and kind of check. In fact, it's longer than that, I'm pretty sure. But we've been doing the affiliate less time, obviously. That came in a little while into it. But yeah, it's great. We don't like when I looked for a sponsor, I wanted someone that I use, someone that I can happily suggest people go to. And I know there are people who've had issues, but when you're selling that much stuff, there are going to be a company will have 5% of the customers that something happens to. It's unfortunate, but it's just that. But there are other companies out there where that percentage is much higher, and I won't use them. So, I wouldn't approach them to be a sponsor of the show. And the fact that people use it and use the affiliate code is really cool to see. And obviously, as I say, helps pay for things like the website and the hosting and all that jazz. So it's good to see that there is a bit of interaction there, which is really cool. And at the moment, what we got Warhounds. So by the time this releases, they'll be out of that week pre-order. But 2 Warhounds, I think their GW's retail price is £40. So knock a little bit off that for Element, and that's not bad, is it?
I mean, that's what I must admit. That's the one good thing that I find with Element and things like that is when you then look at a GW price.
Yeah.
You could say, "Oh, but I can get that for so and so."
Yeah, £34 for 2 Warhounds rather than 40. But yeah, absolutely. And there are lots of good places out there. Let's not pretend there aren't. But Element have done me pretty solid all the time I've used them. And when they've had issues, they tend to be resolved very quickly. So that's cool. Yeah, but yeah, Warhounds for £34 for 2. I'm going to say it 3 times because that's about the only release we've got in the Heresy at the moment. There is a lot of cool stuff going on around GW. Obviously, we've got some of the Kill Team things as well, and there's so much going on with Lord of the Rings and all that. But Heresy will have its time. We're going to hopefully start seeing some kind of info in the It's a couple of months out from Christmas. I would hope towards December we maybe start getting some snippets of info for the new book.
Yes.
But till then, go support the show. Buy from Element. Buy all your terrain. It's a good time if you're not buying a lot of models to get that table finished off.
Yes, yeah. Projects that aren't army building.
Yes.
Things that you might need to just get done.
Yeah, we're in a different financial position than I was however many years ago, and I'm starting to look to the future and what money we need to start saving and plans and things like that. We've got we're waiting for a quote, an actual written down quote for the first part of Gaming Room Truth, which is also going to have a small area of a hobby for the other half. Which is a garage renovation, basically, a redo of the roof and all that. So, yeah, it's a chunk of money. So I'm looking at my hobby saying, you know what, I'm going to cut back a little bit on how much I'm spending on books and gaming stuff, and there's some stuff that I don't need to go out and get straight away, and then if I forget about it, then I obviously didn't need it at all. But the one advantage of then going and picking up all my stuff was I realised just how much I've got to paint.
Yes.
And it's scary. And this is without, like, I'm storing 5 or 6 boxed game sets at work. Some of which will be sold because I'm not going to play them. But I've got 2 Betrayal at Calths, one of which is half built. I've got the Prospero, where I think I've built the named characters. That's it. Might have built the Custodes. So I've got, that's before all the stuff I've purchased. I've got my Mastodon there that I haven't touched yet. I've got been buying a few bits recently that I've seen come up. I'll still buy the odd bit. But there is plenty there. The one thing I am short on is terrain. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to spend a huge amount on that stuff. I will slowly build up my terrain collection, because if I'm going to have a room in which we can play in a year and a half or however long down the line, then I'm going to need terrain to play on.
Terrain is massively addictive once you start getting into it.
It won't be for me. I can't stand doing it. But yeah, it can be for some, absolutely. And the problem is you start to get those ideas, don't you, of cool tables and everything else.
Yeah, and you start seeing things of something like, because especially with loads of GW kits now that's so versatile and you can put them together in different ways, you start seeing, I could do that, and if I'll just get that bit and I'll add that on, and suddenly you've got this massive city, and very easy to get out of hand, I think, even with terrain. Yeah,
and there's so much variety now, even just within GW, as you said. All that Kill Team box is a really good value. There was some, and approaching Christmas, we're going to be getting the bundles, and I think Michael shared over at Edge of Empire's Facebook page some leaks, which might well be true. The Minotaur Munitions Hub, sitting here at 12 containers, 36 barrels, 48 crates, 2 galvanic servo haulers for £125.
Not bad.
A thermic plasma Nexus, same price, for 5 plasma conduits, 1 ferrotonic furnace, 1 hemotrope generator, 1 thermic plasma regulator, and then some trees for the Citadel Woods for 60 quid, and then paint set prices as well. But so, GW terrain isn't cheap, but it's fantastic stuff. But then you can go and get other companies' plastic. You can get pre-painted stuff. You can get MDF stuff. You can get cardboard stuff, which can be quite good now. And then you can still go and make your own. I think White Dwarf had an article in the latest one, Old School, about making your own terrain.
Oh, right,
yeah. So, there's so much you can do, and there's every price. You can go out and buy a 6x4 Zone Mortalis board from Forge World, or you can go and buy a cardboard version of the same, of something that does the same job, should I say, and it's still a good product. The one thing I suddenly realised when I said I'm not going to spend that much money, I might have to ask for some Christmas money, is I do want to get the Forge World tiles for Adeptus Titanicus, because I think they look fantastic. But,
I must admit, I've always been a big fan of the Forge World tiles. I've always thought they were great things to buy and paint and everything like that. And I think I haven't really studied the Titanicus ones yet. Do you know if they're... is Blake Spence still doing those, or is it someone new now doing the orders? Because he used to do all the tiles.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't say, to be honest, so I won't. It's been a while since I've kind of been around, for a day or anything like that, to kind of see who's doing what. And when we went to the open day last time, it was a mix of people there, and I think some of the Forge World crew aren't necessarily as comfortable in that environment, so tend to not be around for those kind of things. But you don't know whether they just take the day off, or whether people have moved around, or what have you. So I can't tell, but I can't even remember all the details, except they looked freaking cool.
Yeah,
so that's something I might have to add onto the list, but that's something that we'll have to. I've got lots of stuff to sell still. All that stuff that I've got sitting around that I'm going to paint, there's a lot of stuff that I'm never getting around to that. That is going. So, maybe I can put that money towards that project to fund the new thing. But yeah,
definitely. There's a way to do it if you can find a way of, making some money out of it and then get that to fund the next thing. It's got to be a better way of doing it.
Absolutely. eBay and again, I'm lucky in that I can do a little bit of that at work, like the prep work at work. So that helps. That's all good, which I'm back at work now. So slightly less excuses not to do things in a weird way. The computer can't call me to go and play God of War all day.
I know. We sort of discussed about this, didn't we? That having lots of time is detrimental to your hobby and everything else.
unless you've got that really big deadline, or you've got just the ability to sit down and work. And this is why I couldn't be a writer of any kind of sort, because I'll sit down in front of the computer and procrastinate all the time. So it's I struggle to do that. And at the moment, to be honest, all the kind of computer time is Blood and Glory list formatting. Oh, for my sins, list formatting. I just want to say thank you for anyone who's listening, who's come into Blood and Glory, who actually sent their list in, and who sent their list in the format I've asked for. It's a big thank you, because there was, the first kind of, and I think it was a Battlescribe list that I got, took the same length of time as 4 other lists that were formatted about what I wanted. It makes a big difference. But I mentioned a while ago we were looking at an alternative. It was never going to be up in time for Blood and Glory, but I'm hoping that I'm going to have an alternative system for the next event. Beyond that, it's actually making me think about, do we do list submission at all? I kind of think I want to, but it's a lot of effort.
List submission has got its bonuses, but it's also got massive negatives, isn't it, for trying to organise things?
And at the end of the day, those negatives are mainly for me. So it's one of those things. And the reason, because I know some people replied to the Twitter comments and the Facebook comments, the reason I have a format is because I'm going to have 60 odd lists to format, and it still takes, even with people sending it in almost exactly how I want it, I still kind of end up just doing it how I really want it, except I'm not going to lay that out and make everyone do that. It just takes a few minutes a list to do it when they're really good. A few minutes on 60 lists is a few hours.
Yeah, definitely.
So, it's a chunk of time. When a list takes 20 minutes to try and go through, because I've got to try and work out what this unit actually is and what it's got, then you can't do that on too many lists. So fingers crossed the new system. At the end of the day, I think you're always going to have a number of lists that come in who've misunderstood or haven't read or what have you, how you want it done. I'm hoping that when we get the new system, we might even have a how-to kind of document with it. Like this is what we want. This is what it's really hard to kind of go through lists when you're looking at one style. Like because the way I like it, the way I would write a list on a piece of paper is, okay, I'm having a veteran tactical squad. Veteran tactical squad's 100 points. Awesome. And then I'm going to have 3 extra Marines in that, and that's 60 points or whatever it is. Probably 36 points, probably. Cool. And then they're all going to have plasma guns. Okay, so that's 7 times 15. Okay, so that's 95 points. Brilliant. And then the sergeant's going to have artificer armor, 10 points. And I can do that. When you write down 8 veteran, or even more annoying, 7 veteran men, Space Marines, plus 1 sergeant, and then a points for the sergeant, which is different because Battle Scribe and certainly Quartermaster as well, where they have that discrepancy when you're buying the smaller unit and then the bigger units get, like, they add that into the sergeant, which is a very simple way of writing a program, but it's not actually how it's done. And when you look at it on that system, when you're trying to work out, do these points add up? You go through it and it just causes that confusion. Even that little thing
just makes that a little bit harder.
Yeah, and it makes, and to be honest, I've had, I asked one person to send the list back to me with detailed points, and they replied with, "I'm glad you made me do that. I made some schoolboy errors in this, and I've actually put models in there that aren't going to be painted, or I don't even own. So I've rearranged my list," But I've always had, when I've been submitting, and mainly it's been for tournaments, to be fair, when I've been submitting lists, I've kind of worked them out on paper, or I've double checked them when I put them onto the computer by, like, I'll write it in the app and then I'll write it out.
Like a manual write out as well, because
the amount of times you pick up on little things.
Well, I think the problem is as well, like, the apps are really handy. I mean, the amount of times I would sit there if you had like half an hour to kill, and you think, what about if I made a list that had this in it, and you'd sit there and you could, and it's a very easy way of hammering a list together. But like you said, if you want to then go through and check it, it's probably, you could use that to make the basis of what you want and combinations. But then if you write it out separately, you've got all those right parts, and you've worked out what's what, and you've sort of redesigned it, but on the paper form, which means it's probably going to be more accurate.
Yeah, and if you do it in a literally a simple way, like unit points, add-on points, add-on points, add-on points, with no funny symbols in there, and even some of the brackets like just annoy me now. Because I'm like, all this stuff, why is all this stuff here? Right? It can be really clean and it's really simple. But that's a personal preference thing as much as anything else. It's all fun at the end of the day. So fingers crossed it'll be more fun next time. But there we go. In terms of talking about this, seeing as we were on that, and so Blood and Glory, we're getting quite close to it now. And what with this year, I'm a little bit behind in prep, which is not a problem. I've got time to go and do it. We're going to use a different system for organising the rounds this year. Hopefully, that's going to help alleviate some of the issues we have with people playing each other. All those, you always get a few little issues when you get more players, and particularly when you're doing the systems we do, where we have a lot of grudges or matchups that we try and put in and whatever. So we're going to try something else. And I've said a number of times, my wife's going to be helping me with that. So I'm coming to sort the program out, and then going to have to. Hopefully, it's going to be set up. And it's going to be fairly simple. Basically, it's going to be inputting data. So just have to show where the data goes. So we're going to have handouts for each table, like we do every time, with the armies on, who played on this table, who played who, what was the result, all that jazz. Still going to do that because that all helps a lot of things actually, and then those can come in all written down and then be inputted and double checked nice and easily. So hoping that will go a little bit smoother than sometimes it has. We're still offering up loads of grudges. You can grudge five games if you want. Doesn't bother me.
I suppose in some ways having Mrs. Truth there is going to make life a little bit easier, because that's someone there who's pretty much going to be there for the admin. Not going to get too distracted with, let's go and have a look at those models over there, and let's go and talk to so-and-so. It's going to be very much, I've got a job to do here. Give me that data, I'm going to put it in.
There's I'm sure she will go and have a look around. She is one of the most organised people I know. She will be cursing me because I'm not very organised, so I'll be doing her head in. I'm absolutely sure of this. But in terms of her work ethic and everything else, she'll be just like, no, you've given me a job to do. I need to do it. So that will help. And it's going to be good to have someone that's there who's, you're not going to go and ask her rules questions. If you are, she might give you an answer. It's probably not going to be the right one, and she probably won't have a clue of what you said, but there might be an answer. But so yeah, there isn't that distraction. I can kind of field in that. We've got Michael from Edge of Empire. He's going to be helping out again and being spare player. So there's all that going on. It looks like I might be helping run Adeptus Titanicus over the 2 days, depending on whether the guy who set that up can make it or not. We haven't sold many tickets for that yet, so if you are interested in coming for a couple of days of Adeptus Titanicus, still plenty of space in that. We've still got space in the Friday event as well for that. So I might have a bit of 2 jobs going on there, but if the Adeptus Titanicus stays quite small, then that'll be pretty easy to run. So,
it should work.
It should work. And next year, hopefully, that will be organised a bit more early. It was just the nature of the beast in that I wasn't ever going to run it like from the outset, but because someone came in and they didn't do that till after the game got released, nature of releases. Age of Sigmar's had the issue there where they knew that they've got some extra match play rules in terms of secret objectives, and they knew they were coming out but couldn't really announce it until Games Workshop had announced it. So they've had kind of information that they've had to keep back. The little things that can get in the way, but little things that we will learn on for next year. I'm sure the organising committee will learn on. There's been a lot happening this year where I think we've all, as anyone involved, has gone right. Next year we need to improve this. It hasn't been as smooth as last year's was because of those changes, because of the nature of growing the event, all those kind of things that can happen. And you're always going to have these issues. I'm sure when we get to the day, everyone's going to come and have fun and everything else, but there's definite improvements we can make. And hopefully, as I say, we're going to build on that. And I know just from the Heresy side of things, what with everything going on this year, and I always wanted a bigger team to run Heresy as well. When you look at, I know we're nowhere near the size of Adepticon or anything like that, but you look at Adepticon, you look at Nova, they have a team of people running these events. I know my weaknesses in organisation and everything else, so actually getting someone on who can chase up this, who can do that, who can, your job's this, making sure that's done will help the event moving forward. So fingers crossed we're going to have a great time anyway, and we're going to improve it for next year.
Excellent.
We will see. Yes. The other, what else was there? There's Adepticon. So we've booked our tickets, haven't we? Our plane tickets.
Yes, our tickets for the plane are booked, yes.
Tickets for the plane, hotels booked. Ticket sales for Adepticon go, I think it's the 18th of, is it October or November? Behind me.
November, yeah.
18th November. Tickets go available, and you usually get, it's quite a rush. It's one of those things where their system needs to be hugely able to cope with a huge swell of clicks for a couple of hours, and then doesn't have to do that again for 365 days. So there's absolutely no reason for them to spend huge amounts of money. They up it for that period, but they're always going to be a little bit under the cosh, as it were, for that. So we're going to have fun. We're going to be sat on our computers that night trying to get in. You're going to be probably aiming at some painting seminars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite hoping to sort of just going to see what it's like. You know what I mean? So I'm not too concerned if because I've never been before.
Yeah,
I just want to because I used to. I remember when I went to my first games day and stuff. It was always very much sort of going there and just seeing what it's like, just absorb the atmosphere. Yeah,
it's one of those things with any large convention. The first time you either do too much or too little.
Yeah.
Gen Con, when I went to Gen Con, I booked too little up because I didn't want to book myself up too much, and ended up with time not wasted, but time I could have spent better. And then other people end up booking too much and kind of crashing before the end of the thing. So it's a really hard thing to do. And usually with any kind of event like this, you have to go once to be able to understand how to go to that event, because every event's slightly different as well. The one good thing you've got with painting as a focus is, I assume they still do it this way, where they do the painting seminars, there's a space for, there's a long table where some people just go there and sit on that table and paint for like best part of 4 days and chat and talk to other people who are painting, and and meet people there who are in that kind of arena world. Yeah, absolutely. So there is always that to fall back on, as well as going and looking at all the stuff to see as well. So yeah, you've got that as a bit of an advantage. I will have to see what kind of gaming options are available, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to that now. It's kind of becoming a bit more real now. We book the flights, very reasonable. If you want to book flights from the UK, you can book them now, and we got ours for $330, something like that, wasn't it? $320.
Yeah, 318. I think it was something like that. 318, which I was shocked at when you told me the price. I thought, I want return, Greg.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, they would have been $270 if we didn't want to take any luggage with us, but something like that. It's ridiculous, but I think that's because they're being run by American Airlines. You don't have to pay some of the charges, I believe. So I was talking to a pilot at Game Club. One of our guys flies commercially. But I mean, that's, if we wanted to go to Scotland for an event and we had to travel on the train, you could spend most of that if you booked late, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's what I couldn't work out when you told me the price. I was like, but I couldn't get around this country by public transport for that sort of money.
Yeah, so it doesn't make Adepticon cheap, but it makes it much more reasonable. And we're, and if you wanted to do it like as cheap as you can, we've had 5 people staying in a room before. So all of a sudden, even the main hotel becomes very reasonable when you split it between 5 people.
Yeah, 5 people, suddenly it's peanuts, isn't it?
Yeah. And there are cheaper hotels. You don't have to stay at that hotel. You can stay somewhere else and all that jazz as well. But I'm pumped. So we're still a few months out, but the Adepticon hype is starting for me, to the point where I've started thinking about what army to take for Heresy. I think I might borrow an Age of Sigmar army and play at least one of the small Age of Sigmar events. But for Heresy, I was like, let's take an army. And the Mechanicum are a nightmare to travel with like that, because they've got so many little bits that poke out. It's like, no matter how careful you are, you're gonna have a few bits snap off. So I've done it before. I'm not, and they survived quite well, to be fair. But I'm not doing it again. So I thought, well, I've been painting these Custodes. So if we take a Talons list, then I could limit it to even the tanks are quite a nice shape to put in.
Yeah, they're a safe shape, aren't they? That yes. They're not going to get obliterated in packaging.
Yeah, so I know that I've got the choice of all the infantry, jet bikes, dreadnoughts, and the Custodes tanks to take. And then I kind of looked around and was like, I've got a lot of Sisters of Battle, and they'll travel, Sisters of Silence, sorry, and they'll travel quite well, actually. So I've written an infantry list at the moment with 6 units of Sisters in. I think there's 40 odd Sisters, and then a few Custodes on foot as well, which I think will be okay and will be terrible in some matchups, but I'm not going to be going into the events where I might play some of the smaller events and then one of the bigger events. So I'm not too worried, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, definitely. And for me, I'm trying to think about how I'm going to transport my painted entries and things.
Yeah, in your hand luggage.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, and this is the thing. If I can fit the army I've written up, I think I've written 60 odd, 64 models, something like that. 3,000 points. Don't even know what points level we're playing yet, or what events I'm going to try and get tickets for. But that army will fit in a single KR case, which will fit in my hand luggage, which is key. because
Yeah,
I'm not having my bag
I've
thrown
heard
around.
some stories, and I'm very, very wary.
Absolutely. And the other good thing is it's like none of it's metal either.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know, but they'll be used to it. You know, the guys flying in Chicago, they'll be like, oh, more models, you know. It's going to happen. It's a weekend where you're going to get a lot of people flying into O'Hare.
Yeah. I suppose, in some ways they must get very used to that. Airport security must go, oh, it's this time of year again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that's good, which means I've got 11 sisters sat on the painting table at the moment, just trying to work out how to paint them. A load of custodies on foot already done. So, again, and a Telemon pretty much done. Need to do a base on all of them, actually. Work out. I'll probably base them the same as my Space Wolves so I can put them in as allies. So, yeah, it's good. I might try but now I've kind of talked about it, I might try and get some pictures up once I've done the bases just to show people what I'm doing. The key. Oh, did you see? Okay, I'll tell you what I'll tie it into. Did you see the article written about being average is good enough? I can't remember exactly how it was titled. Basically,
no, I didn't.
Okay, so someone wrote an article for a paper, and I briefly read it, and I've heard people talking about it. Essentially, he was saying that he doesn't think enough people do hobbies, and he thinks that one of the reasons is because a lot of people feel that if you want to be a runner, it's not good enough just to go out and run. You've got to be training for a marathon.
Yes.
And looking at our hobby, if you're going to paint a Heresy army, it's not good enough just to paint it so you're happy with it. You've got to try and be best painted at an event. And he was basically saying it's okay to be mediocre. It's fine. And if that's what you want to do, and if that's the enjoyment you get from it, if you get enjoyment from the hobby, it doesn't matter how good you are, go out and do your hobby.
Yes.
And I think I've fallen a little bit into that trap of, oh no, I really should do all line highlighting here, blah, blah, blah. And actually, that's been to a detriment of my hobby and my playing as well, because I haven't finished armies.
Yes, you haven't done them, so therefore they've, you haven't had that. You've been trying to make it like, it's like that perfectionist thing of, well, I'm not going to do that because I want to make that perfect, so I'm not going to paint that model yet, or I'm not going to build that model yet.
Yeah.
And then you end up never getting it painted because...
these 10 models aren't done yet. I need to crack on with these. I can't do these until I finish them. Oh, but I don't really enjoy doing this bit. Okay, they sit there for 3 more days. That's 3 days I could be painting something. So my custodies, they lend themselves to it, to be fair. My sisters are silent, have gone the same way. I'm using that watercolour brush to do the washing. I'm using gold spray paint to do the armour. And I'm using a few techniques, and then I'm moving on. And they're not going to be the prettiest army on the table. They're just not. But they're going to be an army on the table.
And they're going to be painted.
And they're going to be painted. And they're going to have effort. I'm going to try and make them look as good as I can within that remit. But I'm not going to sit there and highlight every edge of their cloak and then, and watch it rub off on my fingers and then do it all again. I'm not going to do that because you know what? I don't know how much money I've got sat in that cabinet unpainted, but I'd rather it was painted. Yeah,
definitely.
So,
I think there's also a nice feeling when you actually complete something, even if it's just a case of completing an army to a very, maybe not your best standard, but like a mediocre standard. You've completed something.
And it's one of those things. It's a real. Everyone's got a different reason to be in the hobby. We're all on this scale, and we slide up and down it. And we, even through our life, we slide up and down it. And in general, people like you will, top level painting will become more and more and more important but at various times in your life, it'll be actually just want to paint this and have fun with it, and then you'll go back up again. And we have to be a little bit careful that we don't judge other people on our standards of what we want from the hobby. There has to be a little bit of that because we don't mean to do it, and we don't mean it kind of like someone will turn around to me, oh, come on, Greg, you can paint better than that. It's like, yes, I can, but I don't want to on this project. I just want to get this army painted. Yeah, and that's not a problem. So I think the article's interesting. You can find it. I'll try and find it and reblog it or whatever. But it's, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that's kind of come out of it. But the idea of hobbying for fun shouldn't be lost.
Yes.
Particularly, and I actually had this. I had a little chat about Age of Sigmar. The Age of Sigmar, certainly the UK scene, the events that I know about, have kind of settled into this. I don't want to say rut, but they've settled into this on these train tracks of events are 2,000 points. They use these scenarios, all the scenarios from here, and they don't change any rules here, but they might do this one thing. And I'm like, but all the events are the same, right? Is it time that we Age of Sigmar major events, major in inverted commas, but large events, should we say? That one of them just goes, we're doing 1750, we're doing 2200. And someone said, so you can have different classes of events. I'm like, no, who cares if it's the biggest event in the world? Who go, actually, we're doing 2250 points just to mix it up. Because we got this thing. And the bloke kind of said, but why would you do that? I said, because it's fun. That's my answer is, and it won't be everyone's idea of fun. Some people really love that kind of hardline competitive thing. But for me, it's monotonous. It's like, my army doesn't change because I haven't had any new models out. So for 6 months, my army stayed the same because it's the best army I can make for that points value. Change the points value. You don't change the skill of the player. You don't change the ability to write army lists. You don't change any of that stuff. The best players will still win events, but at least we'll see something slightly different on the table.
Yes, definitely.
So all those kind of things over the last couple of weeks have been in my mind. So, and I'm sure after a period of time, there'll be a case when I'm like, actually, I really want to paint this model as well as I can. But that's not the major part of my hobby,
Well, yeah, if you think about it, it's where everyone draws the line, because for me, if I'm painting something, I can very quickly get drawn into it must be the absolute best thing I've ever painted and start lavishing time on it and technique. But whenever I've painted an army or things that need to be painted less to a lesser ability, I find it very hard because I end up sort of scaling up. I start off going, I'm just going to do this really quick. And then I'm just going to spend a little bit longer on that knee pad and just make that tidier. And then suddenly, before I know it, I'm going, I've done it again. I'm sort of spending too long on this model. And it's very easy to slip into that, slip back and revert to that. And if you do have like a sort of an ability level that you think, I can paint it up to this, you're not going to want to do that for absolutely everything because you just never get to the end of most of your projects. So it's knowing how to balance that off, I think, and say, right, okay, this I'm just going to do it to this degree, and if you can stick to that, you're going to have a lot more fun. Than getting dragged into the sort of the trying to constantly improve stages. Yeah,
it's being aware of it as well. And as I say, a very small aspect is being aware of not making other people feel like that.
Yeah.
Because it is small, but it is there. There is that social pressure. I think particularly in Heresy, there's that social pressure, to paint a certain style because it's the most favoured style because most people look at this game in that slightly historical context. But it's fine not to paint that way. And also, there's this perceived things. We're that Heresy is where the real modelers are. And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, I think when most people say that, they look at 40k, and I think there's certainly a high percentage of that. But there are certainly 40k players out there who can paint and model just as well as any Heresy player. But other game systems have a high level of hobby within it as well. But again, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be welcoming people who, are lower down that sliding scale. So,
yeah, no, definitely. I think it's important to, it's to consider because you not every army is painted for the same reasons.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff. Okay, right. Well, I think, that's a proper rambling all around kind of intro. We have AJ on to talk about Heresy Camp because obviously I wasn't there, and I think it'll be interesting to hear his take on what's going on. That's AJ from Boys of the Golden Throne. And then following on from that, we have the first in a series of interviews with Black Library authors. These are all people who've worked on the Heresy. The idea of these interviews is to open up the books have been out for 10 years. We've been recording this podcast for 5 years, whatever stupid it is. And I think there's a lot of knowledge that was put out years ago that maybe hasn't been put out since but is referenced. And so part of what we're doing is maybe going back and getting that info new again and seeing what's, and then also what else we can get from that as well. So we have got Mr. Dan Abnett on to talk about his experiences with the Heresy. And we're going to go forwards with hopefully plenty of interviews from Black Library authors. So we'll come back after the music. Well, joining me now, we have Mr. AJ. How are you doing?
I am very good, sir. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm grand. For those who don't recognise that voice, you might as well plug your podcast here.
Oh, well, yes. I'm one of the hosts of the Boys of the Golden Throne, a.k.a. the Bot GT podcast.
I should warn people that it is not always safe for work.
No, not at all.
But it's a very different style from this podcast. But I do listen. It is grand. So
yeah, I mostly blame John and Teo for the craziness. But,
yeah, I mean, having Teo on a cast, it's always going to go one way, isn't it? So.
Oh yes, he's our special snowflake, Mr. Teo.
Absolutely. So it's great because I got to meet you guys at Las Vegas. It was first, actually sit down and meet, which was really great. And hopefully, again, some point when I'm over there, or indeed get you guys over here.
I need to come back. That's for sure. I know I didn't get to make it up to go visit you when I was doing my 6 months in Germany, but I did get to go briefly to Forge World, but it was so quick. I only had about 2 hours there, so it just wetted my lips. I need to go back for more.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have to get you over for one of the big Heresy events. That'll be cool. So the reason we've got you on is because you went to a different Heresy event. You want to introduce us to that one?
Yeah, so I was very lucky and got to go to Heresy Camp in Rockport, Texas, run by the boys over at Radio Free Estevan. It was an amazing event. It could be either 5 to 3 days where they rented out a camp on the coast in Texas, and we basically had 5 days of gaming. We had all these different bunkhouses and many different events. Henry from Cult of Paint was there doing 2 different sessions of his 2-day tank course. And then there, a million different events and, little side events. It was really something. Very, very cool. I personally loved it because, like you, I recently just got married, and we actually did something very similar for my wedding, where we rented out a kids camp and got all of our friends and family there. But as you know, with weddings, being the main person of the wedding, it kind of goes by like that. So at the end of it, I was like, oh man, I'd really like to, actually be a guest at this wedding. Well, basically going to Heresy Camp was just like that, but plus Heresy. So I was over the moon, to say the least, for 5 days.
Excellent. Yeah. So we did talk about this on the show a little while ago. It sounds like a really cool idea. There's a kind of easy setup, I suppose, in a way, for hiring a summer camp out of season, in that, you know, the facilities are there for you.
Absolutely.
So that takes a bit of the burden, a little bit like a more grandiose version of what we titled Heresy Camp over here. The first one, the guys, the Edge of Empire guys, run up in Durham. How many people did they get in the end?
So in the end, there was about 45 people.
That's
I think
cool.
there was around, I believe the number was about 28 for the first couple days. So 28 people for the 5 days. And then come Friday, we had about 42 to 45 people. But yes, the camp is a perfect place for it because everything was provided with your ticket. They had you know, your bunk, all your room and board, your food was taken care of, and the food that was kind of my biggest worry, I would say, for the whole thing. But the food was excellent. I was quite impressed. So pretty much everything was taken care of except for if you wanted some adult beverages, you had to bring those yourself. But the camp was completely set up for all of your needs. The only, I would say, downside to the whole camp experience, and this was in no ways controllable by the guys hosting the event, but they got a whole bunch of rain the week before,
right,
and the mosquitoes were just intense. Now, I am a Canadian that used to do tree planting in northern Ontario, like in the middle of nowhere, and I've never experienced bugs as close to that before, but this was down in Texas. This was like as almost as bad as that. I don't think Henry Steele would ever go back to that part of the world because I'm pretty sure he's still recovering from like PTSD from the mosquitoes. They were intense. So we couldn't really use a lot of the camp facilities. Like there were kayaks and sailboats and stuff like that you could have done. But basically everyone just hid inside and ran from one building to another, just flailing their arms above their head wildly to keep the bugs away, which was entertaining for the rest of us inside the buildings. But yeah, it was quite something. In terms of a gaming experience, I've never experienced something like this, and the camaraderie of everyone that was there. It was like as soon as you met someone, there was, you've been to many events, you know how they can be kind of cliquey, right? You come with your group of buddies from out of town and you guys kind of stick together. This was like you could go and introduce yourself to everyone. Everyone was there for the same reason and had everyone invested quite a bit of money to come. Lots of people traveled to get there. I took 4 airplanes to get there and home. So, everyone that came was very invested and just there to have a good time. I didn't hear of one single argument. If there were any arguments, it wasn't really anything like, okay, yeah, we'll just move on. Like the attitude of everyone there was just exactly what I would want for any event moving forward. It's going to be a very hard thing, I think, to beat the feeling and the camaraderie that everyone had down there. It was very, very cool.
Would it be fair to say that everyone there listens to Radio Free Isfahan, or were there others who kind of found out about it third party? Do you know?
I'm not too sure. I would be, I guess, maybe surprised if there were people that, maybe they had heard. I would say at least they had heard about it and then would have listened to Radio Free Isfahan to hear what it's all about. But definitely I would say there was a lot of people that I had met down there that I recognized from, voicemails and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and the reason for saying that is you're going to have, if everyone's got that shared common interest, not just of Heresy Gaming, but they're also listeners of the same show, there's going to be that kind of club mentality that you're all part of the same thing, even more than, I go to Adepticon, you have, Heresy 40k, whatever. Yeah, you're still wargamers, but you still have factions within wargaming. And even then, even if it was just 40k, you'll have the people who like, whatever podcast and people who don't like it. But there's that kind of more of a common link through, which is cool, which is good. At the end of the day, I think Heresy lends itself a little bit, like, I think it's generally perceived to be less ways of kind of playing Heresy, if you know what I mean. As in, we're all, even the people who want to do well, still understand at least that there's that narrative element within it. Whereas 40k, the same tournament, you can have the utter tournament tryhards and the fluff bunnies all at the same event, and there's very little kind of connecting them. Which Heresy lends itself towards a little bit, which is good.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So that is very cool. Now, did I hear you mention something about, before we get into how they run the events and stuff, did I hear you mention something about breakfast as being one of the few downsides? Was that you? The timings?
The timings, yeah. So it was funny because it was the same thing at my wedding when we rented out a kids' camp, and it was that you've got workers there. There's they're set to their schedule. So at Heresy Camp, breakfast was 7:30 to 8:30, and of course when they announced this, you hear the perpetual groan go out from everyone that's there. But I did quite well. There was only one breakfast that I ended up missing, which I'm actually very glad that I missed it, because I got to go into town to the beautiful burger place called Whataburger and got to feast on their breakfast. So yeah, it's that was maybe a bit of a maybe it would have been nice if they could move that up, say, from 8:30 to 9:30. But all in all, it just got us all up to there was a lot of people finish their breakfast and they're all a little dazed and confused still from the night before, and you saw a lot of kind of grudging pair-ups go. Then it's just like, well, we're all up, you want to get a game, like, okay, sure, yeah, let's do this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as the perfect venue, is there? If there's going to be something which is less than ideal, but if that's one of the worst things that you can have, then you're not going to grumble about it. But it's something to bear in mind for people if you're thinking about doing something like this yourself. You can't. It's like looking for a house. You'll never find the perfect house.
The perfect house, yeah, for sure.
You need to find the house that will do almost everything you need.
And to me, it wasn't really a downside. Like, we were all there to play games, so I would have been, not that I sleep in, but to me, like, if you are a person that sleeps in all the time, you paid all this money to go down and you're sleeping in till like 11:30, it's like, come on, man, get out of bed, let's play some games. That's what we're here for.
Sure, yeah.
So I think it just facilitated more game.
Absolutely. And of course that might vary depending on how many drinks you've had the night before as to how keen you are.
Of course. Of course.
But there we go. All good. So 5 days, as you say, of Heresy. You said you had, should we talk about the stuff around it? So Henry Steele was out there doing paint classes. There were other events going on as well.
Yeah, so let's we can just like maybe start from Wednesday and move ourselves forward from there. So yes, Henry started on Wednesday running his 2-day Cult to Paint. So that was going on from about 9 o'clock until 2, 3, 4. It kind of was a little bit flexible, but so there was a bunch of guys that were going off and doing that. They had their separate kind of arts and crafts building that was probably a lot further away from the main house than Henry wanted. So he, at least for the running, away from mosquitoes. Yeah. But that was going on. And then there was a Centurion 1,500 point narrative event going on Wednesday as well. That was running from about 10 o'clock to 3 p.m. And that was, I kind of arrived as that was going on. So, some people were getting involved with that, but there was a lot of just kind of chit-chatting and people meeting. And then I would say the big event, gaming event for Wednesday was the start of the Desolation of Montag, which was a 3,000 point narrative event run by our friend Will. It was a very, very cool event. He had made all custom missions for it. Every single mission, I believe there was 5 of them. each one had models associated with that mission. So I think, for instance, there was one where you had an Imperial Knight, and you would place that with your opponent in a mutual desired location on the board.
Sure.
And then each side would have like 3 tech priests that you could divvy up to units. And what you're trying to do was race your tech priest to activate the knight, and then race the knight off the table. So really cool, different, very narrative driven ones. There was also one about there was a propaganda bunker that you were trying to either secure or blow up as the loyalist or traitor. So it really, kind of helped drive the mission, helped drive the narrative, I found really well. And one of the cool ways that they did pairings, which I love, I really, we at the Boys of the Golden Throne run a lot of events. And the pairings is always something that I've personally struggled with, because I don't really love the Swiss pairing aspect of it. It's a little bit too rigid and kind of tournament-esque. I am saying that using my bunny quotations here.
I'll stop here. I also don't think it works that well, because for the first 2 or 3 games, it's not as relevant as you think it should be.
Right.
Yeah.
So usually at our events, we like to keep it loose and just, traders on this side, loyalists on this side, pair yourselves up, go find a table and have fun. And while we like to keep it loose like that, it does tend to lead to problems of, people have already paired up, and this guy was in the bathroom, and now the only person he can play is someone he's already played, or on a board that they've already played, or whatever. The cool thing of what Will did at this event was that he would get either depending on who has the initiative, have the traitors or the loyalists. One side goes and picks a table. And so all the loyalists, let's say they go and pick a table. Then the traitors get to go and pick the mission, because we were playing 5 different missions, but everyone could play a different one at whatever time. They would then pick their mission and then go find a player to play against. So it made it, it kept it loose, but it still was not as much of kind of a gong show of just like, okay, and go and pair yourself. It was a little bit more structured, and people could walk around and say, I really like this table. I've been eyeing this up for, the past day. I really want to play on this. Or, that you want to play a certain guy, or you've had a chat, in between the last round. It helps facilitate that. So I really enjoyed the event. It was a 2-day event, so that bled into Thursday. So moving on to Thursday, we had Cult of Paint continuing. There was also some hobby classes that were going on throughout the weekend. There was an LED class going on from about 9 to 2 p.m. And then the rest of the 3,000 point event. I'll also say that powerful Zach De La Rosa from the Forgotten Legion fame, he did this amazing game called Brews and Pew Pews. And basically what it was a 4-person tank battle game that was just, up running all weekend. Along with this tank battle game, there was a keg of beer that went along with this game. So, which is the brews part of the Pew Pew. So it was really cool. You basically find a team of 4 people, and you would do basically a tank draft. So, if anyone that's worked in like a kitchen washing dishes or anything, there's these big trays that they use for moving dishes and stuff like that in and out of the big washers. He had one of those filled with tanks on it, plus more cases filled with tanks. So he had this huge table just with maybe 20, 30 different tanks, super heavies, everything you can imagine. And basically you just go in a draft. So the first person would go choose a tank, then the next person go, and then get to the last person and back again. He had all these cards with everything that you'd need for the tank. And then basically you'd all deploy in separate corners, and it was a free-for-all. There's little places you could upgrade, but every time you kill a tank, either you kill a tank or one of your tanks is destroyed, you have to take a shot with Zach or drink a beer or something like that. So it got pretty funny over in that corner of the gaming hall, and was usually the last event going late into the night. Somehow Zach was usually the last person to leave the gaming hall and the first person to come in as well. So the man just doesn't sleep, I guess. But rolling along to Friday, there was also a resin casting course being put on, which was very, very cool. I was a little not feeling super great that morning, so I tried to stay in for as much of it as I can because casting is something I'm very interested in. But I ended up having to go and have a little lie down after that. Right. There is also a continuation of the Centurion event, another Centurion event going on, a 1,500 point. There was a Planetfall event, it was called, which was another 2-day event starting on Friday. And it was an escalation type event. So I believe it was 4 rounds. The first round, it would start at, I'm going to say around 1,500 points. Then the next round would be 2,250, then 3,250, and then up to your final game was 4,000 points, or you could do a team game with someone else, 2,000 points each. So that was a really cool event run by Cody, which ran over 2 days. That one was a lot of fun. Then there was also a Zone Mortalis event, which the powerful Ryan Kimmel was running. Sadly, there was supposed to be a celebrity Q&A with Gav Thorpe and Tim, but I don't know what from the Eye of Horus. I'm not too sure what happened on that front, but sadly it fell through. But that is fine because we still made later on that night lots of fun, and the pool was finally open, so we had a little pool party instead. The Saturday there was another hobby class, which was building using plastic card. I didn't attend this one, but it sounded very, very cool. And then the continuation of the Planetfall event. So along with all of these scheduled events, though, there were endless, just side games going on.
Sure.
One of the coolest ones, this guy, Andrew, brought a huge Prospero table that was 6x8. So he gathered up, a whole bunch of some Custodes, Space Wolves, Thousand Suns players, and they did, I think it was a 2v2, I think there was about almost 20,000 points or something like that on the table. And they did that legendary mission from Book 7 of Russ and Magnus fighting. So they're fighting in the middle. It was just super cool. All these, Ryan from Radio Free Esteban lives in Esteban. He lives in Indiana and has an amazing assortment of terrain. And he rented a van and drove from Indiana down to Texas. And so the tables at Heresy Camp were just off the hook. I had just run an event 2 weeks beforehand and really got my juices flowing of oh man, I got to put more effort in. I think that I put a good amount of effort in, and it's something we strive ourselves is we really want nice themed tables.
Yeah.
And I think we do that, but man, Ryan,
it's definitely the one thing being over this side of the Atlantic, just not having the space to store these things, so we can't do that kind of thing. Is you see it happen over there for certain events. And it's really cool, but it's just really not feasible, particularly in the southeast of England. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Just so that Prospero thing, was that someone to do with the organisation, or was that someone who had paid for a ticket?
That was just a camper. There was lots of campers that just
got into the spirit of that.
Got in the spirit, hey, I drove here, so I brought every single army I have, or John, who is the gentleman that ran the resin casting course, he brought a 6x8 table that he built himself, this very dense industrial city table. And we did at one, I believe it was on the Saturday, we did an Armies on Parade, and he filled the entire 8x6 table with his Ultramarines force.
Blimey.
So, like, you know, there is a lot of stuff like that where you just wouldn't see that at a regular event. There was definitely something special about this that people really, you know, one gentleman brought a full Mechanicum display that had a smoke machine and LED screens, and it was either a little Titan bay where they were taking apart or putting together a Reaver Titan. You know, just some unbelievable talent and skill that was shown off at this weekend. Really made me want to come home and start painting again and working on my next project.
Yeah, and I think so. Ryan's known, particularly, you know, he said Ryan's known for the tables he provides for events, and I think that's something that is I certainly kind of associate with the Radio Free Istvan, is that kind of effort into like the physical requirements of what you need and going above and beyond. So I think there is a definite sense of that people getting involved is partly because of them and the way they go about or went about their podcast. So yeah, I think you've got to give them credit for that.
I think you're right, though, that, you know, that definitely was, you know, I'd never met Ryan before. I definitely talked to Ryan and Michael, and I've met Scott before, but I knew without meeting them that, hey, if I go to this event, I know that I'm going to show up there and I'm going to, you know, there's going to be amazing tables, and, you know, I'm hoping there's going to be good people. That wasn't for sure, but I knew that the table situation was going to be well looked after, and it did not disappoint. It was one of those things where you're like, okay, I need to try to get as many games in here, because I want to play on this table, I want to play on that table, I want to play on that table. And, you know, I probably played more games in those 5 days than I have probably in the last 2-3 years, because I've started running events. And
yes,
and it's, you know, we have events happening here. I'm just running them, so I can't play in them. But
I feel your brother. Yeah, absolutely. And that's not something... And it's because we're talking about this, we're talking about how cool that is. It's not something I think event organisers should necessarily try and live up to, because, you know, it's not feasible for everyone to do it. So just for anyone listening who's like, oh my word, I'm never going to be able to run an event because I don't have these glory. You know what? You don't have to do that. It's fine.
You're totally right. The way that I try to approach it from an event organizer's perspective is I want to always see that I'm doing something in between, you know, the last event. So whether it's, you know, improving the paint job on a couple pieces of terrain to just make it pop a little bit, or adding, you know, hey, this table was a little bit light, so I'm going to add an extra piece, and you know, that it's constantly at least building in some sort of way. But again, it always comes down to space. If I bring home another tote of terrain, my wife might kill me.
Bless her. Yes. Okay. Were there any more kind of we gone through Sunday?
Yeah, I guess the last event type things is, I mentioned there was an Armies on Parade, which was there was a best trader and a best loyalist, as well as best overall. The best loyalist and trader were peer voted, and then the best overall was voted by the camp staff and Henry Steele and Radio Free Istvan. And then there was also a Cult of Paint event that was just run by Henry for units. So there was a best kind of infantry squad, and I say that with air quotations because they're, you know, a couple like monstrous creature squads or something were in there. It was just for a squad. It was probably a better thing. And then non-infantry, so tanks, planes, things like that. And I think for me, that was my favorite part of the weekend, just going around and seeing some of these amazing armies. Two armies that I just have to give a shout out to. One of them, have you heard of the Fault Line 30K group out of the San Francisco Bay area?
I know of them rather than anything specific.
So if you remember Andrew and Bill that were at LVO playing in our event, they're part of that crew. They also came to Heresy Camp, and Andrew brought his Night Lords, which he also brought to the LVO, and I still think it's maybe one of the greatest armies I've ever seen painted in the flesh. But his friend Marcus, who's also part of that group, came also with Night Lords. And he did probably the coolest conversion of a squad I've ever seen in 30K, where he has a terror squad that is based on all of his favorite 80s horror film characters. So he had a Pennywise. He had, I think he had like an alien. He had, I'm really bad at all these kind of movies, but like Leatherface and all these, don't know all the names, but, looking at them, it's like, oh, it's that guy. And, just amazing armies that were out, just being able to go around and see the level that people had put into. And, whether that they were, top tier and that you kind of level that you'd see in White Dwarf, or just like, very well tabletop, that just seeing how many models they had done on the table was inspiring enough. So for me, I'm more of a hobbyist than a gamer. So that side of the event was awesome for me. I'm happy to say that I walked away with a third place in the infantry, and I was able to take home the best loyalist army as well. So I was very happy with walking away from that, and the prize support for the whole event was pretty amazing. So luckily, I went down with a friend who had extra room in his luggage, help bring home some of the stuff that I was able to walk away with, which was really awesome.
Yeah, that's excellent. So we've got essentially the event was a mini convention for Heresy. That's the what I get looking into it, and
talking about it.
Because I know that like when I go to Adepticon, part of the beauty of I'm guessing this camp is the same as part of the beauty of Adepticon. Adepticon, you can't really leave the venue, and most people are in that boat because most people don't drive there. So you've got this atmosphere where you are on site all the time, and that is for me the best part of Adepticon. I'm guessing that it creates a similar thing down at Heresy Camp.
Yeah, and that was my first time experiencing that kind of atmosphere. I haven't been to Adepticon yet, but I have been to LVO a few times, and I'm imagining like with LVO, Vegas is half of the draw almost. They're people that go to Adepticon or like Heresy Camp. It's like, hey, you're there for the weekend. You need to make an effort to go out and see something else. Where let's say, Vegas, hey, it's Vegas. You can just go out, go to a show, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that aspect of it was something that I really enjoyed. And I think because of, luckily, not to say that LVO isn't a place to go, because I have had great times, but, people are usually there and it gets cliquey and, hey, these people are going off to do this dinner or go to this show or whatever, where I feel, and from what I've heard of Adepticon, it's very much more of, hey, we're all here. Like, it's a little bit more of a camaraderie and hanging out together as a group.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's different styles of event, and LVO is still very new as well, and it potentially will grow into something more like that. But certainly, I must admit, at like 7:00 in Vegas, in Bally's, I was like, oh, where's everyone gone?
Yeah.
7:00 in Adepticon, and I've been chatting to some random bloke, I don't know his name, for the last hour about various armies, and it's and for me, like, don't get me wrong, if we're going to go back to Vegas, I've already talked with the wife about this. If we ever have a trip to Vegas, which we want to do, it will probably be around LVO time, and we'll tack LVO onto the end of it.
Maybe LVO 2020?
No, not that soon. But for me, when I was thinking about where I'm going to go this year, it's like Adepticon, that experience for me, and it's going to be different for every gamer at the end of the day, but for me, that's what I prefer. So I will be doing that. And, as I say, each their own, but certainly for me, that's what I really enjoy. So that's cool. Yeah. It sounds like a fantastic event.
It really was. And I think, I would say there's maybe a tad bit more saltiness in our community over the past month or so. I think you would maybe agree. And even with, we won't get into any of that right now, but even with that, cloud above us, as some people would call it, I didn't hear, there was no saltiness over the whole weekend. You'd think, get that many nerds together that are very passionate about something that would maybe be a topic, but everyone was just there to have a good time. And I as a person that went to summer camp as a child, the worst day of my entire year would be the day after getting home from camp, because you meet all these cool people, you've got a daily routine, and you just get home and you're like just depressed, like, I want to hang in with my friends. And it was the first time that I felt that since coming home from summer camp as a child. I got home, plus instead of just sitting at home hanging out as a kid, you got to go to work the next day. And man, I just missed all my Heresy Camp boyfriends. So
sure.
I can't wait to go to the next one. And there is going to be another, not Heresy Camp, but they are calling it War Games Camp. Radio Free Esteban is currently undergoing some changes due to, I guess, the changes over the last month.
They've diversified their podcast based on their desires, and that's completely their decision, and that's cool.
Totally.
That's up to them. One thing it does for War Games Camp is it does open it up to more people, which is it can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. But they seem to be pretty organised guys.
To me, as long as that vibe stays the same, I don't care what games are there. There were some dust games and things like that going on at Heresy Camp, and I think as long as that vibe stays the same, I think it will be a great event. So it's going to be called War Games Camp, and they are currently shopping around for another camp, I believe, in the Indiana area. So stay tuned to Radio Free Esteban for more information on that. I know that I will be going myself. So come and see us there.
Absolutely. And the good thing about Indiana is links are quite good for Indiana.
Yes.
So certainly for Indianapolis, because of the nature of where it is and the big conventions and stuff they hold. So it's one of those things where travel doesn't necessarily have to be hugely difficult. Because we were looking at, so the prices that they had were $290 for the 3-day and $490 for the 5-day.
Yeah, and completely worth every single penny. Compared to like Adepticon or some other place that you're going to go and get a hotel room and paying for food and everything like that, it was, in my opinion, a steal for the cost of the ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. So for 5 days, that's 3 meals a day plus your board and lodging, your lodging and access to all of that stuff. The only things that were extra were paint of cult classes, I believe. But
that's correct. Yeah.
Again, that's understandable, bearing in mind, the costs that are involved in that. So the value is there, which is really good. It actually makes it viable to travel there from Europe as well.
And
that's that's something that I think sometimes I was talking to someone about Adepticon actually, and he was like, "Oh, when is it?" Because he'd never really heard about it. And I said, "Well, I booked my Adepticon tickets. Neil and I did. We talked about this on the show, I think, for £320, the plane tickets, which is not an unreasonable amount of money by any stretch.
Not bad at all.
It's really good. The key is booking 7 months early. You've got to do that, and you've got to be prepared to take the carrier you wouldn't necessarily choose, but it's a 5-hour flight. It's 5 hours of your life. You can kind of get over it. You've all got we've got iPads and Kindles and whatever, so you can get past that. So yeah, if I consider even spending £400 on a flight plus $490 for a 5-day event, that's not a bad price. It's not achievable for everyone. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everyone should go out and do it, but it's not unreasonable at all. So, bearing in mind, if you're going, as you said, if you're going to an event, say in the middle of a city, and then you go out for a meal, and then go and drink, you're paying bar prices for the drink. You're paying restaurant prices for that meal.
Yeah.
Here, your food's done, and you can bring your own alcohol.
Yeah. All those little costs, as you know, from Vegas and things like that, they add up very quickly.
Yeah.
So, and also just having a place where you're not going to spend money. You don't have distractions to go out, and other than maybe stuff from the Grimm brothers, which does some laser etching stuff, which was at Heresy Camp. There was anywhere to spend money. So, I hear a lot from people that like, oh, I can't go to Adepticon, it's too expensive, or LVO, or go to Forge World. It's as a guy that has gone to concerts and music festivals since I was 18, and not having a huge paycheck to go along with them, it's doable. You just have to plan and okay, I'm going to take care of the flight early and deal with that, and then the ticket separately, and you just break it all up, and then by the time it comes along, you're not even spending money, except for spending money, I guess. But it's all, you just need to sit down, plan,
and know where to give up. Like we're planning our honeymoon, which is going to happen in January, and you know what, I don't need to go, and even at 6'2", I don't need to pay for an upgrade on my seat to get extra leg room for 5 hours. For 10 hours, maybe I do. It's being sensible about all those little bits as well. And actually, you bring that price down to a region where, as I say, not everyone, I'm not suggesting that everyone, but for a lot of people, is accessible if you want to do it. But it's about just being a bit clever with it and organised as well.
Yeah. Hey, maybe I don't need this extra model, which is just going to sit on my painting shelf for the next 8 months, and instead I'll use that money to book a plane ticket or whatever. Yeah.
There's ways and means. Yeah, that's it sounded really good. In terms of that, it's something that I don't know if I'll be able to fit on the schedule, unfortunately.
So there's just too many good events happening right now. That's the problem.
It's not just that as well. Life's changed pretty big this year, so we're got a lot of other things going on. There's only so many times I can fly across to America for gaming events and leaving the missus behind. So
you and I both, my friend, after the last spending 6 months in Germany and with LVO and Heresy Camp, and not yet going on a honeymoon. I need to make up some plans.
And it seems like they had a good, nice spread of events there as well. For if you wanted to, your event would be on. If you want to play Zone Mortality, it's there. If you want to play the Centurion games, they were there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know, you could listen to the latest episode of RFI. I believe it's 117 or 118, where they're discussing, Ryan just went and checked out a new camp. So the wheels are turning, and I've even thrown my hat in to host a small night joust or something along those lines. So I think, the next event is going to just be even better, with lots of more events and more different, more than just Heresy. I'll be going for Heresy, obviously, but I think it's going to be awesome. And if anyone wants more information, they can check out Radio Free Esteban for more info. And I think all I'll say is just a huge thank you to the Radio Free Esteban guys. I think Michael especially for the amount of work that he put into organizing, as he was the local guy there on the scene.
Sure.
I think he did a lot of the stick handling with the actual camp, and also, to a man that would rent a van and drive 20 hours in a cube van filled with terrain. Huge shout out to Ryan as well. So yeah, if this sounds at all like something you'd want to do, I can't stress to you how much of an amazing time I had, and it is well worth the ticket price.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Blood and Glory coming up, we're not there yet. This is the second year we're running Blood and Glory. For me, for Heresy, moving forward, this is the kind of like having the multiple events on is something I would like. Having been to Adepticon and seeing the way they do with lots of different stuff, hearing about this, it's definitely something I'm planning.
Yep.
I know that I'm not as organised as these guys, so but you need a team. Saying like you offering to help run, like those kind of offers can be invaluable for people running events like this, because it just takes that little bit of pressure off and allows them to concentrate on something else as well. And you need a team, and I don't know how many people they had involved all told, but I'm guessing there were a decent number of people.
I think probably at least 10 plus people were heavily involved, whether they took on running one of these events, or they helped with Ryan driving down from Indiana, or helped Michael stick handling stuff. There is a lot of people that helped out to make the event as good as it was, and I think a lot of amazing new friendships and bonds were made, and that's just gonna make the next one even better. So it just from an EO's perspective, me running events for the last 2 years, this is just, I was starting to get a little bit burnt out on it,
Sure.
But after going to this, it's just, refilled my tank and just given me so many different ideas to incorporate into our events here and in Victoria, BC. And, I can't wait for it. We're definitely going to steal some ideas from Heresy Camp and integrate them into the Bot GT events. So
Excellent stuff. Well, I hope people got something out of that. As I'm the same as you. There's a lot there that can be read into that. Hopefully, there's some people listening to this who are like, that sounds. Being part of that organisation sounds fun, and I'm going to find, a local event or whatever and help out. Because it's great fun to do it as well. There's a reason you and I run events. We wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy it. It's a different enjoyment, but and it's a lot of work. But
it's fun, and to see a community grow. And our last year, our kind of mission statement was to grow into bring some of our Seattle friends up to events, and just seeing me introducing people and new friendships forged, and just seeing the community grow here. That's why I do events, and I'm sure it's a big reason why you do events as well.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels worth it. Usually after the event, in the weeks building up to it. Sometimes
maybe a few days after the event, after we recover.
Yeah, all good. Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on. As I say, so AJ, Boys of the Golden Throne, again, I'll reiterate, not safe for work content. Also, Radio Free Esteban, not safe for work content.
No, definitely not.
Just as a warning, a very different styles of show, but certainly worth going and checking out. Thank you for coming on, dude.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to come on, sir.
Awesome. Take it easy.
All right.
Joining me now, we have a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Dan Abnett. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. I thought we might as well open up right at the beginning. This section, we're talking about the history of the novels. We're trying to work out, I think it's 11 or 12 years since the release of the book. So you were probably involved a little bit before that. Do you want to just explain kind of how that very first kind of call or email came about?
Yes. Bearing in mind that everybody involved in the Heresy series was already writing for Black Library, and Black Library had been going for several years and had enjoyed a great deal of success. We each had got very successful series out, which we all wrote individually. And I think there was some rumbling that they might want to do something Heresy related, but I think we never believed it because for the longest. Black Library Games Workshop was always very, very touchy about anything that involved kind of the core material, the absolutely canonical heart of anything. So me going away and writing Imperial Guard books about Gaunt's ghosts out on some periphery was fine because I couldn't break anything really. Yeah. But coming in and writing a major story that had Primarchs and stuff, there was more danger of something going horribly wrong. But so I think in the end, when it finally happened, it was a complete surprise. They summoned a number of us. I think it was about 7 or 8 of us. And I'm actually trying to remember exactly who those people were the first time round. But anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Gav wasn't one of those people. Gav
wasn't at that point, I think, writing very much. But I think he was still on staff.
Sure, yeah.
So
that sounds so alien now.
Very, very.
Yeah.
It was Graham, and it was Jim, and it was Ben Counter, and it was me, and it wasn't even Aaron. And the first one, I'm pretty sure.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. He was still a noob back then, wasn't he?
He was a noob, yeah. But anyway, they gathered us all together, and we went up to the headquarters, as we had often done individually, to talk about our own books. And for the first time, it was like a catch and release program at a zoo. They put all the authors in one room. It's weird, and they just briefed us on this idea that what we would do would write a series of novels recounting the history of the Horus Heresy. And the first thing that happened really was that Alan Merritt, who was at that point the absolute master of continuity and had been since the year dot at Games Workshop. Alan's absolutely fantastic. He still is the master of continuity. He just, he's now sort of stepped back from his job there, but he, everything went past Alan, and he knew everything backwards and could get quite feisty with you if you've got something wrong or you asked the wrong. And he came in for the afternoon with a stack of codexes and old photocopied sheets of this, that, and the other, and basically pretty much everything that had been published at that point, which is 12 years ago. But that was still a vast stack of books. And his own copies were full of post-it note tags marking every single instance that the Horus Heresy was mentioned anywhere in the canonical printed material for the game, going right the way back to Old White Dwarfs and everything, including rule books that none of us had ever seen before because they were the original old versions of things. Sure. And he proceeded to talk us through everything that was known about the heresy, essentially everything that had been said that we sort of couldn't contradict.
Yeah.
And we talked more expansively about the ideas of the things they'd never said and this kind of stuff. And we basically began to fill in and build from that point on. And we got very excited. And a number of things happened from that point and then into the first couple of meetings. All of the authors got on well because we'd met each other at Games Days. But it was the first time we'd been asked really to work together. It was the first time there'd be the principle of a writer's room, which is very common in comics, which I have experience of, and it's very common in TV and stuff like that, but it's not really common at all when it comes to novelists. Sure. And there was a danger that we would not play well with others. And land grabbing and basically writing a novel is a very individual, solitary occupation. And there was a feeling that this could end in disaster. But all of us, probably because we hadn't seen the light of day for months, liked the sociable aspect of it, and we got on well, and it got exciting, and we were brainstorming with this kind of very, very sort of democratic fervour of making the story good rather than grabbing bits of it for ourselves. So we would throw ideas onto and this continued throughout. throwing ideas onto the table because they're good ideas, not because we personally want to write them. So quite often, as is proven in the history of writing the novels, some really great ideas have ended up being written by authors who weren't the people who proposed them. And I think that's one of the loveliest things about the thing from the inside point of view, from making the Horus Heresy point of view, is that it developed a spirit of camaraderie and creative cooperation that took everybody by surprise. And I don't think the series would have survived and lasted and continued if that hadn't been the case. So that was really good. But we also realised it was a daunting prospect. I can't remember what the estimate was back in those misty days when we first did it, how many books we thought we were going to write. I have a feeling that somebody who would now be laughed at and pointed at and laughed at suggested that it might be as many as 25 books to tell the whole story. And but off we set, and the idea was that we would do a kind of run-in trilogy to get it off the ground. And bearing in mind, when we wrote this, we write them now with some confidence that there is an audience. But when we wrote it, we had no idea. We thought people would be quite interested, but we had no idea that people would be really interested. I mean, it was sort of stupid of us not to think that, but at the same time, it would have been very arrogant for us to assume that.
It's a fine line to walk, isn't it?
I'd like to walk, you know, sort of GW stuff. Warhammer 40k is incredibly popular, but it tends to be, you know, people have their own particular part of it that's very, very popular. They love the Imperial Guard, they love Tyranids, whatever it is they love. The thing with Horus Heresy, because it's the core background myth, everybody's interested. And we just didn't expect the uptake that we got. But we planned this novel, and you know, things have changed drastically over the years, but that's sort of how it was. This was, I think we all left that first meeting bewildered that they were even going to go for this, that they would let us have that amount of, I don't know, freedom. That we were doing something so important that it might be something that we would be doing for several years to come. Little did we know. And also, I think, excited. And we were also excited by the way we had collaborated enthusiastically. And that really was the benchmark. And funnily enough, ever since then, even as the actual roster of writers has changed, because it's shifted over the years, a few people have dropped out, a few people have done less, or, you know, new people, obviously, Aaron's and Gav, as we've mentioned both already, but huge examples of people who've come on and absolutely now fundamental part of the process. They've all come on and said the same thing. What a great team to be part of, and how much joy there is in that community, creative community. And I think some people wanted to do it, wanted to be part of it, not because they wanted to write a Horus Heresy book and they wanted to enjoy that, but actually they wanted to be in that room. They wanted to be part of the process. Because we'd all talked about it so enthusiastically. It's been great, and there was a sort of, I'm skipping ahead vastly now, but then just to do that full circle, actually, sort of, you know, 12, as you say, 11 or 12 years later, a couple of years ago, Games Workshop Black Library went through a slightly rough patch where their relationship with the freelancers wasn't as good as it might have been, which had a negative knock-on effect to all sorts of things, not just the Horus Heresy books, but everything. I'm not saying these books weren't good and they weren't still produced, but there was the relationship became slightly more strained because of policy changes within Games Workshop, which have now been altered because they realised they were mistakes and they were not getting the best out of everything. And as you've seen this year, Games Workshop Black Library now doing better than ever because they re-implemented the creative connection with the freelance community that they'd always had, which is, you know, shows that people can be smart and not stubbornly hold on to mistakes they've made. But that was great. But actually, one of the things that happened was that we stopped having as many of those meetings. And if we did have meetings, it was much more pared down meetings of just the 2 or 3 authors who were going to do the next couple of books. So there wasn't that kind of group effort. Because back in the day, for the longest time, there would be people at the meetings who had no prospect of writing a book for maybe a couple of years, but they were still present and still contributing. And that was sort of, I suppose, seen as a bit of a sort of waste of time and money, not efficient. But it was hugely efficient to have all those minds being brought to bear on the work. And recently, in this new sort of golden age of Black Library, we have had, I think, 3 meetings now where the band's back together again. And we've just all gone that. In fact, the last meeting we had, which was about a month, 6 weeks ago, we all came out of and said that was the best meeting yet. That was amazing. We all were just buzzing with the the energy of what we were going to do and what we thought of and all the stuff that we'd gone into that room not expecting to find. So something's working. That's what it's,
Awesome. Yeah, and just to jump in on a couple of points there, because there's a couple of things. Well, first off, going to the events, and I live in England, so I can go and see authors. I haven't met all the Black Library authors, but I haven't yet met one who I didn't think was at the very least a nice chap. And I can imagine you all getting on well. Sometimes you can meet, and I met a couple of famous authors, and I just thought I don't want to be around you much. But there doesn't seem to be any of that in Black Library. That the egos are not there in that respect, and everyone is extremely supportive of the others. And if you're going to have a team writing something, that's very important.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's a couple of things I say to that. One is that we're clearly very, very good at hiding what bastards we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other thing is, that's not to say that it's all sort of sunshine and flowers, and we just go, oh, that's a lovely idea, Gav. You do that, and you could do that, John. And it's all, it's not. There have been some incredibly heated meetings. There are some strong personalities. It became a standing joke right from the early days that any dispute we had would be resolved by what we called a monkey knife fight in the car park. That was the only way to get things done. And there have been some flare-ups, but they've always ended up being useful. Some proper arguments. And again, one of the recent three meetings, I found myself was the only person who was sticking up for a particular thread of the story. It was like 12 Angry Men, and I was sort of saying, no, this is something we planned for years. We've been planning something for years, and now everyone's having cold feet and they're saying we're not going to do it. And and if that's the case, explain why. And if that's the case, explain what we do with all the structural work we've done to build up to this, because we need something to replace it. There was a huge tension and a sense that an argument was brewing, but it was a creative argument. It was a creative argument. It wasn't like, oh, I don't like him. And in the end, we resolved it in ways that ended up with something that sort of surpassed what we'd had originally. So there have been moments. There have been sulks and a few angry stomping of feet and stuff like that, which I think is a good sign, because I think if we just got together every 6 months and went, oh, that's lovely, yeah, do that, the books would be a mess, absolute mess.
No, I absolutely agree. And yeah, just because people are nice doesn't mean they won't stand their corner. Absolutely, and some very intelligent people as well. Not something I'd like to argue some of those people with. Be able to back it up a lot better than I would. And then the other thing you mentioned right at the start, Alan Merritt came in with all those notes and everything else. And as far as we know, and from what we've talked about, that's come from the Sabretooth games. Like, even before the novel project, there were steps involved just to get to that point.
Yes. Well, Alan had written all the text for that because he's the only person who knew it in a comprehensive sense. Yeah. He's written the Heresy, what was essentially a card game, which was then turned into those beautiful books. So that was our sort of A to Z. That was our basis. But the balance of those books is useful and vital though they are, is completely the wrong way around, because they, from the point of view of doing a novel, they work brilliantly for the card game because they specify certain little points and then illuminate the big events, but they don't necessarily fill in the gaps. They're either too close in or too far away. Yeah. So that's why they became the kind of framework for what we had to do, and we then discussed that with Alan. Alan is to me, in fact, both Alans, Alan Merritt and latterly the late Alan Bly, who was a fantastic supporter from Forge World and developing the Forge World books, which we were then developing alongside and cross-pollinating everything we were doing, just as sources of continuity. There have been people like that, and I would say Alan Merritt particularly. Without his guidance, we would have, again, faltered, not because we didn't have the enthusiasm or the ability to look stuff up for ourselves, but he could often contextualize things in ways that would have been impossible otherwise. And indeed, there were 2 or 3 occasions, one memorably, which I actually can't tell you about in detail, but one afternoon where we had him for the day and we essentially covered all the ground. We sort of got to about 2:30 in the afternoon, and we were meant to be running till 4 or 5 o'clock. And it's like, well, we've done everything. Should we just go home? And I think Alan said, well, whilst I'm here, is there anything anybody wants to talk about? So we just idly said, let's have an off-the-record conversation about all the stuff that we will never get to say about the 40K universe. All the fundamental design that has existed at its creation. And there's my phone. See, I told you that would happen.
I'll pause it.
So ready?
Yeah, go.
So he said, does anybody want to ask any questions? And we decided to idly ask him about the conceptual stuff that lay behind both the Heresy and 40K generally. That is to say, the stuff that has never been forward-facing to an audience and will never be forward-facing to an audience. The stuff that was in their minds when they created it and has guided them, but things that can't be revealed. Not because there's anything wrong with it. It's just that there are certain things that remain. Yeah. Behind the scenes, because it's part of the way that the universe works, and the Emperor in particular. And we had this extraordinary conversation, which the crux of which we will never relate and will never be put into a book directly, but was enormously important for guiding the way it worked, the way everything else worked, because we were aware of the invisible structure in a way that we hadn't been before. And that was a truly extraordinary experience. And I think that came back to us recently. We had another conversation so we're actually going to have, as it were, another conversation like that. We're going to have another meeting like that where we talk about the stuff that lies beneath what we're presenting in order to make sure we're all agreed on it, so that we then present it with a unified front. There have got to be mysteries that remain. Yeah. There have got to be things that are never spelt out directly. But we need to know, between ourselves at least, what we think those things are, so that we are cohesive in order to present stuff.
Yeah, it's having good foundations.
Absolutely,
on which to build.
So there's been a lot of that. There've been some very, very, very sort of memorable and important conversations. And as I say, it is the guidance of people who just. I mean, I think I know the game pretty well, but I don't pretend to be an expert, and I rely on my own research as I go along and fact checking with people, because what concerns me is the story of the character, and then I'll check that the details, the fact checking is correct. And I think that's true of a lot of other people, but Alan Merritt and Alan Bly, actually Gav is probably the most knowledgeable person at the table, John French as well, but Gav particularly has often been an extraordinary person for just being, because of his experience in the studio, just coming up with stuff and being able to, answer a question. You go, how do you remember all that? And although again he's now moved on from Black Library, for a long time Laurie Goulding was our continuity goblin. I mean, he just not only was he there to run facts past so we could check that we got things correct, but he would often quietly stick his hand up and say, and he would link together things that 2 or 3 different people have been talking about in the course of the morning in ways that we couldn't have seen, because he'd seen a continuity connection that we were then able to exploit. So, like I said, team effort, people playing to their strengths and uniting to a common cause, which is the way it should go. And I say that from the point of view of somebody who has spent many, many, many years working in comics, and particularly in the American comics industry, where Marvel and DC, for instance, the notion of a crossover between titles that are meant to coexist in a shared universe are commonplace. They happen all the time, and they're often fun to do. And sometimes you get a real great connection with the people that you're working with on the different titles. But they're often an absolute nightmare. And I think I went into the Horus Heresy thinking, this is going to be like that. This is going to be like a crossover with novels, and that is going to be horrible in the end because of all those sort of territorial squabbles you get into. And so I was delighted when it wasn't.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, and talking about that collaboration, we have the obvious 2 connections that you had with Graham, where you've taken that to another level. So Horus Rising and False Gods, and then Prospero Burns and Thousand Suns. How was that, as in taking that, that step up and working that closely together?
It was weird. We did it in different ways each time. I get on very well with him and I respect him enormously. So we had that sort of connection about the way that we wanted to approach things, which is fairly similar, but with very, very different styles and tones, I think, which is why they complement. But with the first 2, it was really a case of let's get this project started. So I started writing Horus Rising, and once I hadn't finished it by the time he was already writing the second one. So I was feeding stuff to him, and he's described it as me as a tennis match where I was knocking balls into the air so that he could then smash them. And we just fed the process like that, and it worked with a minimum amount of tinkering, which was just great because we clearly were just working in simpatico at the very least. When it came to the Prospero novels, they were much more sort of a simultaneous collaboration, and weirdly, I think I've said this before, but weirdly, we were going to do them the other way around. I was going to do the Thousand Suns, and he was going to do the Space Wolves. And I had sort of I don't know, again conceptual problems with Space Wolves. That I loved them in the game, but I didn't like them in the fiction. I found that they were too they weren't, to me, they didn't feel serious enough.
The caricatures.
Yeah, Space Vikings. It's a bit the same problem that exists with orcs, actually, that they can be too comedic for a novel that is trying to sound serious. And that's why I immediately opted, when the choice came, I said, well, I want to write Thousand Suns because I know I can do those. And Graham went, fine, I'll do the Space Wolves. But as we got closer and closer to it, I suddenly realised that actually I still had to write Space Wolves, and the only way to write them in a way that made me convinced was to take it on head on. And that's, otherwise the book wouldn't be convincing. So we swapped at a fairly late point in the process. And I was very glad I did, because Prospero Bones is one of the books I'm proudest of. And Graham loved writing The Thousand Suns, and he did an extraordinarily good job of it. But again, so that process was very, very different. But those are just the obvious, sort of really obvious to the reader examples of the way those collaboration works. There have been many others that have been much less visible. There have been a couple of occasions where authors, and again, I'm not going to mention any names specifically, but authors have helped other authors out enormously for various reasons when things have blown up on the launch pad, and there's been a lot of people supporting other people. And sometimes it's just a matter of being a sounding board. I got great support when I was writing Unremembered Empire, because I was trying to tie up strings from just about everybody else into one sort of nexus. And that meant long conversations with pretty much everybody, or at least emails, or sending out an email at the last minute saying, quick, I'm trying to write this. Can somebody answer this question? And I get a dozen emails back from people. Also just the interrelation. Nick Kime's writing the Vulcan novels, and he and I talked extensively about the way that would work based on things that I had sort of discovered in the process of putting Unremembered Empire together. So there are, like I said, there are the obvious things that are marketed, like the Prospero books, as being, these are a matched pair, designed that way. But actually that process has appeared often spontaneously in all sorts of other places when it's been needed.
Sure, yeah. Just on the Prospero Thousand Suns thing, though, hammering home on that. Obviously, that was the time when you had medical issues, and they were swapped around in the order. How did that affect the kind of writing of those books? Did you have to go back and really change what you were doing because they were coming out in the wrong order, in quotation marks?
No, it didn't, because we wanted them to be wanted it to be possible to read them in either order. Okay, we didn't want to follow the other, because that just makes it great. We just wanted them to be two sides of one thing. Yeah. So that wasn't so much of a problem. And you mentioned delicately medical issues. Yeah, I had. It was when I was going to say developed, but it was epilepsy. I suffered a number of seizures. Which at the time they didn't know what it was. It turned out that after several months of analysis, it was epilepsy, and I'd had it all my life. It had just never manifested before. So it slowed the writing process down a lot, and obviously it had a fairly big effect on my life. But it's absolutely fine. It's just one of those things you just learn how to deal. To me, the weird thing was there was a slight hiatus. And like I said, it slowed the book down, and there was a slight hiatus in its production. I was also writing around about the same time my original novel Embedded for Angry Robot, and both of them had sort of been started before it happened, and then it happened in the middle, and then I went on to finish them both. And weirdly, they're two books that I am very, very pleased with. And I have made no secret about the fact that I was ill at the time and what it was, and talked about epilepsy and everything, which of course is fits and seizures and dissociative states and memory losses and all sorts of weird things that can happen to you. And the strangest thing to me was that some years later at games days and conventions, people would come up to me to get those books signed, and they would say, that I really like this book, and I know that when you were writing it, you were ill, and it's extraordinary how you managed to use what was happening to you in the books. And I suddenly I said, is it? They're both feature characters who are having dissociative states, memory losses, and weird out-of-body experiences, and all sorts of weird stuff. And I realised that I hadn't done it deliberately. They were still the stories that I was going to write, and they contained those elements. But clearly those elements were written in a particular way because of what was happening to me that I hadn't noticed at the time. So I channeled my experience directly but subconsciously into those books. And that was weird, because it's one thing to do that and then to finish the book and go, gosh, look what I've done. It's another thing to do that, send the book away, get it published, and several years later have it pointed out to you by readers, and you go, oh God, yeah, really? Yes, I suppose it did. It hadn't occurred to me at the time. As far as I was concerned, I was just getting back in the saddle and trying to get the books finished. But I obviously brought all of that with me, and maybe that was really useful. Maybe that was useful for me, but also useful for the books. Sort of to put something in there that as it were, it wasn't imagined. It was something real. Don't know.
Yeah, until you said it, and then as soon as you started mentioning it, it becomes obvious that there is a connection of some kind there. Yeah. The brain's an amazing thing, really. It can do that, yes. Isn't it? But yeah, two fantastic books as well. I'll speak up for Embedded as well. Moving on, you mentioned No Fear.
Yes.
There's a definite different style on that. Is that something when you're coming to the Heresy? Obviously, the Heresy has its own style. It's been talked about a lot. 40k Heresy is very much more kind of everything's going to pot, serious, grim kind of thing. 40k has a slightly different feel to it. But within the Heresy now, we're starting to see a lot more styles of books. Was that something you thought of a lot?
It was. I think we all do. We wanted the books to have their own feel to it. We didn't want just them to be 40k books with a different cast. And so there are obviously technical differences in terms of the historical setting and the mindset. So there are fundamental differences about the ways, for instance, a Space Marine in 30k thinks and feels and behaves the way one in 40k does. But so there was that. Early on, we realised that we were writing, despite the fact that visually it was very similar, that we were writing in a very, very different setting. And that we had to reinvent stuff. That there was stuff that we take for granted in 40k that you couldn't take for granted in 30k. And pretty early on, again, we realised that actually the 40k is the really grim, dark one. 40k is the 30k universe 10,000 years later, where everything is actually as shit as it was. It's gone to the bad place. And they're clinging on by their fingertips, and it is properly grim dark, and it's probably stagnated, and there's something infinitely sort of doomed about it, which gives it its very particular quality, which is why people love it. But although horrible things are happening in the Horus Heresy books, the worst war ever in the history of everything, and some absolutely diabolical stuff, generally speaking, the thing that marks out the Horus Heresy books to me, and I think the other authors, is it's a much more optimistic setting.
Yeah.
It's much more noble and heroic. It's much more aspirational. It's sort of a brighter and shinier future that's going wrong. And indeed, that's even down to the Space Marines themselves are sort of quite well-rounded characters with personalities, with interests beyond war. They are sort of cultured, learned people who are meant to be not only winning the galaxy to make it a better place and make it safe, but also then to be the next generation of leaders who will bring in this brighter future. So despite the fact that Horus Heresy is just, awful, weirdly the setting is much more jubilant and uplifting, which I think is a great thing, and it makes the Marine characters much more compelling to read about. And I think one of the things that we did probably in that very first meeting, but certainly one of the very first meetings, is the plan was to establish the Heresy books as a sort of second milieu of a sort of novels. That is to say, a second area in which those novels could be written, which would run alongside the 40k output. So we wanted to start it off chronologically with the books that we did to set it going. But from that point on, the original notion was that it would be written like a series of novels that was set during the Second World War. If you imagine like a Commando picture library, each thing that's published is another story that is linked to the previous one simply because it's set during the Second World War. But what they could be about was absolutely anything, because as long as they were set during that time period. So, book 1 could be the Africa Corps in Tunisia, and book 2 could be the Battle of Britain, and book 3 could be Midway, and book 4 could be French Resistance. You know what I mean? As long as it was linked by the shared setting, but it didn't really matter. And we thought that way we would be able to explore the vast range of possibilities of what the heresy it represented, and gradually move in a chronological direction to do things with it. So it was actually a much broader remit to begin with. It started off with a tight focus of here's the beginning, and then we'd broaden out, and we would all sort of go off and do our own thing. And I'm not quite sure where it wasn't far in, probably before we reached the teens of the books. There have been a couple of slightly left of centre novels that had come out, which people have liked, but we realised the audience was incredibly eager for us to tell the main story in the right order. They became quite frustrated often with a book that did not advance the overall story, no matter how good that book was. And at that point, we reset our parameters, and we went, right, from this point on, we will advance the story. We might do it in different places with different legions and different characters, but it will all be one and ongoing thing. So we reined in our desire to write wildly and far away. At one point, I literally remember a conversation where somebody said you could do a brilliant novel about a lone Imperial Army soldier at an outpost right on the edge of nowhere, who is stuck there, who is aware that the Horus Heresy is going on, but can't get to it, and it's what happens to him on his planet, which has got nothing to do with it except that it's set there. And we all thought that was brilliant. Really, it would just be such a fascinating, weird, mournful, lonely novel. And I think it would have been. It may well have ended up being one of the best novels of the Horus Heresy, except that it would have driven the readers mad, because it wouldn't have advanced anything. It would have just added colour. So we reined in that creative impulse, and we brought it back into this focus, which is a good thing too, because obviously as we're now reaching the 1074th novel in the series, it's a bigger story than any of us could possibly have anticipated. And just getting the story told thoroughly in chronological order, covering all the different Primarchs and everything that we need to cover, is taking a hell of a lot of time. In fact, we some of our recent meetings, we've gone, right, we've got X number of novels left, this is what we've got to tell, and then somebody stuck their hand up and go, we've completely forgotten blah, and you've realised we've completely skipped over something really important. And we've gone, oh no, shit, okay, we'll have to stick that. So that needs to be another model. Move the order back. So anyway, yeah, there was this. But along with that initial glee about writing things wildly differently set in the setting, there was, I think, a choice amongst all of us to adopt different styles to the way we wrote 40k, and also possibly to adopt different styles from book to book.
Yeah.
So we wanted to give it that different feel, and you could be experimental about stuff, and you could I think when you're a 40k writer, for instance, me with the Eisenhorn books, and me with Gaunt's Ghosts, or Graham with the Ultramarines novels, for example, they tend to be written in the same tone, the same voice. This is the way one of these books works. And you don't vary that because it's an ongoing series and you want to retain consistency. Whereas in Horus Heresy, you can do, I could easily do a first-person novel somewhere and then come back later on and do something in a completely different way to whatever fitted the tone and feeling of the novel. I think we've all done that. We've all been a bit more experimental. And No Fear is the obvious example of me being slightly experimental and living to regret it. Not because there's anything wrong with the novel. Again, it's a novel that I love, and people seem to love, and it's probably one of the most high-octane, visceral novels because it's just sort of relentless. But I made this short because I wanted it to be this kind of, sort of POV right in the middle of this as this huge attack happens. I made the decision to write it in present tense to deliver that kind of immediacy you might find in a modern thriller, which is great. And that's great. And it serves it really, really well because everything is happening now all the way through the book. But as a writing process, it was exhausting because obviously you need to write a novel over. It takes months to write a novel effectively. So, you're coming back to it day after day after day. It is a sort of big burden that you carry around with you for months on end. You go to sleep thinking about it at night and you wake up in the morning thinking about it and then you go and do a bit more. And there is a huge relief when you get to the end of a novel and you can sort of set down that weight of stuff you were carrying around in order to write the novel. But usually in a novel, you get to a point at the end of the day where you go, well, I can't write any more today, so I'll end it at this point and I know where I'll pick it up again tomorrow. With No Fear, everything was still happening now. Sure. There was this relentless present tense energy that was, like I said, exhausting because it wouldn't let go. For the time it took me to write the novel, it wouldn't let me go because I couldn't go back to it and sort of reread it because it was all so instantaneous. It's a weird thing, but if you work at something like a novel intensely, sort of as a full-time job, you will know what I mean. It's sort of any novel will suck you in and get you hooked, and you realize you're sort of quite addicted to doing it and quite desperate to get it done and get it finished and kind of win the battle with it. But that was a particularly hard one. I'm glad the result was good. I'm really glad the result was good and the people liked it. But oh my God, before I do a present tense novel again.
Yeah, I was about to say, after doing first-person perspective novels as well, you think you might have learned.
Yeah. How could that be? And it turns out that was hard enough.
Yeah.
At least with that, I mean, the first, but that's the Eisenhorn books, obviously, which where it seemed to a nice callback to the sort of 1940s gumshoe detective Raymond Chandler type thing of having that sort of voiceover of him doing his detective work, and then I realised how difficult it was to show anything else that wasn't actually happening to him because without having people run in and say this has just happened outside, sir, and it become laughable. So that presented its own problems, but at least there it was a narrative being told in the past tense. It was Eisenhorn recounting a story to you, and a story like that you can pause and you say, well, I'll tell you the rest tomorrow or whatever, but not No Fear. No, the present tense. Jeez.
So we've had, in fact, No Fear is one of the books with less of it, but you're pretty well known for utilising a human character in and amongst the books. As we move on, I'm going to assume you're going to write another book in the Heresy here. Is it harder to find those characters? Because obviously the Remembrancers have, their role has disappeared, and some have been subsumed into legions and what have you. Is it something you still look for? And is it any more difficult? Does it cause different problems?
It does cause different problems. I mean, I think when you're facing, and the same is true for any great big science fiction universe that you work in, but when you're looking at 40k, that's the reason I wrote the Gaunt's Ghost books to begin with, and I still write those. And in Eisenhorn, I have written Space Marine novels, but I always want to find a human character that you can identify with, because I think that makes the books more relatable, and that's served very well in 40k. And in 30k, that should be, absolutely the same thing is true. And also, we wanted, from an early stage onwards, we wanted to show that this wasn't just a great big war that was affecting these godlike beings, but it was having a direct knock-on effect to everybody else in that universe. The fate of the universe hinged upon what was happening, and it was, everybody was going to be affected. The great advantage of 30k, as I was saying just now, is that the Space Marine characters are much more rounded characters with human traits. So it's easier to identify with them and to root for them and to connect with them. So the need for human characters isn't as much, except that there was a great benefit, I think, from seeing Space Marines interacting with humans and to see that sort of that hierarchy within the 30k universe and how these were, sort of essentially that these were sort of godlike warriors that have been made by humans to make human life better, and now things were going wrong. So yes, it is. It is difficult. One of the things that's difficult about as we reach the sort of end stages of the Horus Heresy is that there is so much story to tell, and we've got so many great characters, most of whom are Primarchs and Space Marines, that it's almost what should I say, extravagant to make room for human characters in there. But there are still some very important human characters, and it's not impossible to find them. And I think we would be neglecting our duties to lose sight of the actual human component in the heresy as we reach the end stage, particularly the Siege of Terror, because there are an awful lot of humans on the human homeworld when that happens.
Yes,
and just because you might want to particularly follow, this Primarch or that Space Marine and his massive jaw-dropping battle exploits in the middle of the Siege of Terror, it doesn't mean to say we shouldn't see what's happening to the humans at the same time.
No, I've always felt it's as soon as you lose the human element, you lose the whole reason that we have a Horus Heresy and an Imperium.
Yeah.
It's very easy to lose that in all the coolness of Space Marines and Primarchs, but the reason is for humanity to survive. And hopefully outside of this, we're going to get a Horus Heresy setting and carry on those stories. We might see that lone Guardsman story occur in there.
Yeah, I don't think a decision's been made, but I think it's extremely likely.
I'm one of those people who desperately wants those stories.
Yeah. No, well, I'm glad. I think it's very likely. I think our priority is to make sure that we finish the chronological story.
Absolutely.
For the sake of saying that's done, but to leave that setting open so that we can say, we're publishing a new Horus Heresy story about, as you say, the Lone Guardsman, because it's an interesting thing to go back and look at. So we might actually see much more interesting, smaller human works appearing later that will fit into and be sort of nice companions to the series.
Excellent. So as we approach the end, we know that time limit's going to be that time limit, and that might be longer than a lot of people think. Might be shorter than a lot of people think as well, to be fair. Is there a character or a story arc that you specifically have thought, I wouldn't mind a go at that?
There are some. There are certain bits and pieces. There are certain characters and things that I've become very attached to just simply because I've dealt with them a lot in the stuff I've done for the Heresy. So characters from the original novel, for instance, who those that have survived this far, I have a vested interest in seeing what happens to them. The Alpha Legion stuff from Legion. A lot of the Primarchs that I wrote properly for the first time in Unremembered Empire, and certainly the Space Wolves, again, all sorts of elements there. And there are other strands like some of the human characters, obviously the perpetual characters that I've had a persisting interest in all the way through. And also some of the, part of me is going, there are bits I haven't written yet. There are characters I haven't got my teeth into. There are whole legions that I haven't really featured. And obviously there are big historical events at the end of the Heresy that I would love to, sort of be close to in a fictional sense. So there are lots and lots and lots of things to do, and dare I say, we have sort of worked out that we have had our monkey knife fight in the car park, and we've worked out how it's going to work, sure, and how we divide and how we deliver, and the pressure is on us. It is worth saying that when we started, let's say it's 12 years ago, however long it was. It probably is 12 years ago, considering the planning meetings. Yeah. When we started, none of us doubted that we would see this through, unless the series failed, commercially, that we would persevere and it would finish. None of us imagined that it would take this long, and I think many readers didn't. Although there are equally many readers who are going, "You're doing it this so quickly. Why aren't you taking longer?" For everybody who says, "God, they're flogging a dead horse. How many books are they going to get?" There is the people who are also going, "I can't believe you're skipping over this. I want more." We didn't know it would, take this long. We did realise that when we realised how long it took to tell these things properly, that we've not sort of inflated the story at all. It is, we're telling it in a kind of measured tone that is appropriate to the length of the story. But when we started to realise recently that actually the end was in sight, and that we needed to begin preparatory planning for the end and how that would work, because we had to execute it as well as, if not better than anything we'd done so far. There was a sense of astonishment that we had actually got there. That we, after what is a long time, over a decade, going, oh my God, we're actually getting to write those books that we imagined writing on the first day. Which is a very, very weird experience to see it through over that kind of scale of time. And also comes with that, obviously, enormous pressure. Because we seriously can't fuck that up. We really can't. I mean, to the absolute best of our abilities, we must write the best books we possibly can. So that the ending of the Horus Heresy is everything that everybody hopes it was. It's not going to be, let me just point out. There are going to be people who go, oh, that's not what I wanted. Because you can't please everybody, but they need to be the best books that we think we can produce, rather than just going through the motions and getting a book out on time and sort of covering all the bases. And of course, the added thing is that every now and then you get the luxury of a book. If you think a book isn't working well, or a book is going to be better, and it's that important, you go, okay, we push it back down the schedules and we come back to it. We can't with this. It's going to be an interlinked sequence where we can't fall out of step, we can't run late. So, the pressure is going to be huge. It's going to be fun, but it's going to be huge. And weirdly, as a final comment to your question there in the first place, of, all those books that I wanted to write, on the very first day, I remember this clearly because we talked about the big phases of the heresy and what it would be like. On that very, very first meeting 12, 13 years ago, we talked about the scouring, the post-heresy events that took place, where basically it was the big cleanup operation. And I remember saying then, God, I want to write a book about the scouring. That's brilliant. I really, really, really want to do that. And I kind of jokingly pigeonholed the opportunity to do that. I said, I want to do that. There can be others, but I'm doing one. I'm doing a book about the scouring when we get there. And I meant it, and I was serious, but at the same time I was going, that's years from now. And I can now see me doing it, like in the comparative future. I'm going, oh my God, I'm actually going to get that book. It's been sort of sitting in very, very tiny, collapsed, sort of embryonic form at the back of my head for nearly 15 years. And I'm going, oh my God, look, I'm finally going to get to do that. So, wow. I think that's one of the things, actually, in the next 5 or 6 years, Black Library readers are going to finally see me deliver books that I've talked about writing, and then the chances have gone. So things like the remainder of the Beckwin trilogy that started with Pariah, which and also the sequel to Double Eagle, 2 books, 3 books in total if you count those, that I have promised for ages. And it's not like I couldn't be bothered to write them. The Horus Heresy's got in the way. The Horus Heresy, it's always been, this takes priority. We need the next heresy book. It needs to take priority. And things keep getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And so I think one of those things is partly now I can see a point where we can actually say, right, I can stop writing heresy books, or I can stop writing heresy books for now. But it means that with that energy, I can go, right, now to finish Beckwin, to get those books written, now to write Interceptor City, which is the sequel to Double Eagle. Now to write, finally, that scouring book that I was promising myself to do. That is really quite exciting. And I also don't want to renege on those promises, because I think a lot of people have gone, oh, he's never going to write that now. He's never going to write that now. Talking about it enthusiastically in 2006, and now, But yeah, hey, look what's happening. We're getting there.
And let's be fair, again, for those who aren't fully aware, Black Library is only one aspect of your work. You've signed deals to write more comic books, and you're extremely busy doing all that jazz as well. So it's not like you're and plus your own works as well.
I am a ridiculously prolific person. I write comic books all the time, and novels, and computer games, and all sorts of different things. And the reason I still do all of those things, but particularly why I still write, there was a point probably a few years ago where I could have made the choice and gone, right, I'm going to stop writing comics because I love writing novels, which I do, and I could have become a novelist full time. It's just that I love writing comics. I would miss not writing comics. And similarly, I could have gone, well, I'll just stop writing the novels and become a comic book writer full time, which I was for 10 years before I started writing novels. And it's like, yeah, but I also love writing prose. And I think the secret is I like writing both. I like the completely different challenges they represent. I like the novelty of moving from one to another and the freshness of going, I've been writing comics for 6 weeks. Oh my God, prose, that's fun, or vice versa. And I think that's one of the reasons that I stay inspired and stay enthusiastic and stay interested, because I give myself too much to do. And I'm always moving on to something that is sufficiently different from the thing I was just doing to make me go, oh gosh, what's this? How do I handle this? What do I do with this now? And that is really huge fun. I've spent a lot of time in the last few months working intensively for DC Comics on Aquaman and Titans and a book called Silencer, which I created for them. And I've loved it. I have absolutely loved it. I've written over 50 issues, not in the last few months, but in the last few years, I've been the regular writer on Aquaman. I've written over 50 issues of Aquaman. Huge achievement. Love it. And then I thought to myself, I've got to get Gaunt finished. The latest Gaunt goes book number 15, Anarch, which is the end of this current cycle and is a really huge punctuation point in the series. Ties back things that have been running for 15 novels before it. It's a huge deal for Gaunt fans and for me. And the thrill of going to that when I've been dealing with superheroes almost exclusively was great. Not because it was better than superheroes, it was just different. I was writing prose rather than script. I was writing Warhammer rather than super. It was just like diving into another universe. I was at I did a talk at Waterstones a few months ago where I was being asked questions, and I said something at the time in answer to a question that I didn't sort of really. It was just the answer to the question.
Yeah.
But the guy in charge of the branch said, "Oh, that was a great thing you said when you described your working method." And I went, "What do you mean?" And I hadn't even remembered what I'd said. I just made something up off a cuff. He said that I described it as, I get bored if I stay in one universe for too long. And I thought that does sum it up. I get bored if I stay in one universe for too long. And by moving between universes, I think I get to deliver the best things that I can possibly deliver for the readers. And so it sort of works. It has a sort of double effect.
Excellent stuff. And you covered almost all the titles there that I was going to just ask the questions about as well, because I know some people would be waiting for information on those. What can you tell us about what's coming up?
Wow. Well, but literally, you have caught me here in the last few hours of writing Anarch, which is the 15th Dawn book, which is going to be huge. I've been planning parts of it for a long time, and there's other bits that organically happen whilst you're writing it. And I want it. And, it is the fourth book in the fourth arc. The fourth arc, rather than being made up of discretely individual adventures in each novel, has been almost one big novel spread over four. So this is a huge payoff. And I think people have been literally waiting for it for a long time. And they are, if they're enthusiastic Gaunt readers, they are going to get huge amounts of stuff. I want to say, good stuff, because it's like there's some bad stuff happens in it because it's a, exciting war book. But at the same time, I didn't want to say it was bad stuff. It's just stuff. The delivery of story, the sort of closure of storylines, the revelations, the twists, the payoffs, the surprises, all of that is massive. In so far, in about 4 or 5 instances, things that I wasn't even expecting. I was going into the book thinking, right, here's my big story. This is how I'm going to end it. These are the bits that I need to sort out. Oh, I've got this. I need to finish that storyline off. I need to do something with that. I need to do something with that. I'll work out where I'm going to do that in the end when I get there. Because, sometimes you do things improvisationally on the fly. And some of them have just made me go, oh, my God, I can't believe that's just fantastic. I can put this into that, or I can connect things together, or indeed just do things I thought I'd never, ever, ever have guessed that's where that was going, or that's what is going to happen with that character. So it is extraordinarily exciting, and I'm enjoying it enormously. And then once that's done, it is actually then up to Black Library to decide whether I write Penitent, the next Beckwin book, the second of the 3 Beckwin books, or I write a Horus Heresy novel. And whichever one it is, it's that followed by the other one. So the order is theirs to determine. And meantime, I'm writing, comics, loads of stuff. 2000 AD is my other, lovely place that I go to. I've got several series running there, which people seem to really like Grey Area and Brink and Lawless in the Judge Dredd magazine. All of which, if you're a reader who likes my work and you're not particularly familiar with my comic work because you're let's say a Black Library reader and you know me from novels, those two series that I've just mentioned in particular, any of the 2000 AD things, but Brink, 2 volumes of which have now been collected in trade paperbacks at your local Waterstones or comic shop, and Lawless, which I think now there's now 2 volumes of that. I would recommend to almost anyone even if you're not very familiar with comics, I think you'll enjoy them. Those 2 and a series I do for Boom, the 3rd and final volume of which has come out. There are 3 lovely trade paperbacks, I think called Wild's End, which is, again, you could order Wild's End volumes 1, 2, and 3. Each one has got very, very different things going on in it. Lawless is essentially a space western. It's set in the Judge Dredd universe. It's about a female judge who's the kind of sheriff of a colony world, and it's the most gorgeous artwork by Phil Winslade, and people love it. It's just very involving and character driven. Brink is a detective series set in the near future. It's kind of a murder mystery. It's a police procedural. But it's the best way. If you've seen the TV show True Detective,
yeah,
it's kind of True Detective meets Outland. It's set on a space station. It's about weird things going on. There's a murder, but there's something creepy about it that you can't quite put your finger on. And again, that's become a very, very critically acclaimed series in 2000 AD because it's a little bit different from the things that 2000 AD usually do. And Wild's End, the 3rd one that I would recommend, which is a very proud achievement of mine, is a story about an alien invasion set in sort of 1930s England. So it's very sort of safe and comfortable, except there's a sort of alien invasion. But all the characters in it are actually animals. They're all anthropomorphized. So it's a bit like Rupert. There's the main character and his best friend's a cat, and there's no reason for that. It was just a whim that we decided to make early on. The story is completely grown up and adult and serious, but the fact that they're anthropomorphized means that you identify with their characters really quickly.
Sure, yeah.
It's another thing that has, it's a really unlikely thing for me to do, but it works, and it's one of those things that I'm just really, really pleased that I did, because it's going into a different universe. It's going somewhere else and doing something different, which means that not only is that fresh, but it means that when I come back to Horus Heresy or whatever, I'm fresher because I haven't been stuck there for too long.
A change is good as a rest, as they say.
It
Yes.
absolutely is.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we won't hold you much longer because you did all that. I will ask you one very quick question. You can give a very short answer and you can refuse to answer if you wish. Is there a story, not necessarily a book, is there a story that someone else got that you really wanted to get and you didn't, like one particular story?
Wow. Is there a story yet? Are we counting the ones that haven't been published yet?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
In that case, no. No, I can't. I mean, there are stories that I would have been very happy to have written.
Sure.
I mean, really, there are parts of the Heresy that I would have been as delighted to write as anything else. Sort of some of the big events that people have dealt with. There's none of them that I sit there going, "Oh, I wish I'd written that." And there's certainly none of them where I sit there thinking, "Oh, I wish I'd written that because I'd have done a better job of it than he did."
Absolutely.
And I look at what people have done with some of those, particularly some of those iconic moments in novels, and gone, "That was great. How fantastic is that?" In fact, the reverse is sort of true, in as much as I've already told you I wasn't expecting to write the Space Wolves, and I thought so that was me writing a bit that I wasn't prepared for. But actually, No Fear is a really interesting example, because at no point in the build up to that novel in writing the Horus Heresy did I ever expect to write the book about the Battle of Calth. I just did not think that was going to be one that fell to me. In fact, if you'd asked me at any point up to the point I realised I was writing it, I would have said, well, of course Graham's going to do that. Yeah. Graham is Mr. Ultramarines. Of course he's going to write the one big Ultramarine book in the Horus Heresy. Of course. It was a given. So rather than there being a book that I wish I'd written that I didn't get a chance to, when the time came for the Battle of Calth, I think Graham was under pressure and it was going to be tight, but he also said, just because I write Ultramarines doesn't mean I have to write 3 Ultramarines.
Yeah.
So let somebody else have a go. And it's like, well, who's up next? Who's the next person due to write a Horus Heresy book? Because the next one's got to be Calth. And I went, me? So I ended up at fairly short notice writing a book that I was absolutely not expecting to. So the real answer to your question is the reverse.
Sure.
People going, oh gosh, I wish I'd remembered to write the Battle of Calth. How come he got it?
I'll ask your forgiveness on that. That was a bad question because it had negative connotations the way I said it. Because I've certainly heard people say, "Oh, I thought I should have written this book," and then I read whoever's version, and it was much better than what I had planned. I have heard that kind of thing.
If you're going to interview other Horus Heresy writers about the heresy thus far, state of the heresy. And you're going to ask them obviously similar questions over the next little while. Make sure you ask them all that question, because I think you're going to get some really interesting different answers. But I bet you don't get a bad answer. No. I bet you don't get any of them sit there going, oh, well, I wish I'd written that one and that one and that one. And quickly wrote them, did terrible jobs. I just don't think. I think we all might wistfully think of, oh, I wish I'd been able to write blah. But none of us are jealous, I think. And most of us are going, I'm just lucky to have written the ones I wrote.
Absolutely. Excellent stuff. So I think it's a good note to leave it on. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been great. We could talk forever. I certainly could listen forever anyway. So it's all great stuff.
I'm here. You know where I am.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
There we go. Episode 100 done. The start of the next 100. Next episode. We'll be old men. We'll be very old men by that time.
I think I'll be blind by then.
Yeah, probably. From all the painting, yeah?
Yes,
from painting. Yeah. Before we go, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see this. The Guardsman. This is right. So, are you aware of the Hell's Reach YouTube animation?
I think so.
Right, so a lot of gamers are. So Hell's Reach, written by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. There's a guy called Richard Boylan who just started to put up animated, an abridged version in chapters and kind of animated using motion capture, and then like this real kind of grainy image, black and white. And it's fantastic. It's really good. So he started doing that on YouTube, and it's come out. You can go and search for it. Search for Hell's Reach or Richard Boylan on YouTube. It's there. It's fantastic. Aaron's shouted it out on his blog and various other things as well. So a lot of people will have heard of it. Well, he actually got together. He had this project he's been talking about for a little while. And he actually ran a bit of a Patreon, like a one-off Patreon, to try and help fund some money for it, because I think he said it cost him about $8,500 or $9,000, and he's basically got a 4-minute 20 film of, it's called The Guardsman, and he filmed it in a day in California, I think, and with proper actors, actual working actors, and he's YouTubed videos about the pre-production with his friend on, who'd done a lot of the props, things like that. But it's possibly the only, it's probably the best depiction of the 40k universe I've seen.
Cool.
Certainly live action. I don't think you're going to find many better than that. Obviously, actually $8,500 to $9,000 doesn't go very far when you're talking about professionally filming it with professional actors and makeup and everything else. I'm sure that that eats away your money like no one's business. But I think it's well worth it. I won't say anything about it except to say it's called The Guardsman. So there's a guardsman in it. And the props look good. I think if you were going to make a film of it, you would actually make them look less like the guns in the game, that kind of thing, to make them more realistic. But they look like the guns in the game, so it's
Right,
really well done, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
But yeah, it's 4 minutes 20 seconds, something like that. It's fantastic. Go and check it out. So I'll try and put a link in the show notes. It's called The Guardsman. You can check it out, I say, on YouTube. It's been doing the rounds as well. Richard Boylan. And fingers crossed he reaches out, or GW reach out, and you never know. You could end up with something from it. It's small percentage chance, I suppose, but it would be awesome, because his Hellreach project was fantastic as well. So thought I'd mention that one.
Cool.
Because we just talked a little bit off air about licensing. There's so much stuff coming out from GW working with other licenses. There's board games coming out the wazoo, all kinds of stuff. I'm waiting for. I bought a piece of art from Warhammer Art. I'm waiting to turn up. That was a dangerous process. Spent a lot of money, on one piece of art, and could easily have bought 4 or 5 different ones. Managed to restrain oneself. We'll try that. I'm sure down the line I'll get a few more bits. But I've still got 2 calendars to cut up and put up if I need some more art. Always a good one.
Yeah, do you know, I've been looking around my office trying to think what else I'm going to do to it to try and, my little... I've been really organising of late. I've been, buying my paint racks. I've been buying trays to hold my brushes in, and, reorganising, putting up notice boards. And I've been thinking I could do with a little bit more, maybe, art on the walls. So I'll be looking around for something as well myself. Cool.
Well, I'll get in touch with you off air and maybe be able to help you out. The Black Library, the calendars are really good in that you get that large-ish picture, and then underneath it you get the calendar. So
are they doing those for Christmas again this year?
I would assume so. I don't know for sure.
I seem to remember, didn't they sell out really quickly before?
One of them did. Another one, others haven't. So they've done, at one point they did, I think they might have done, I'm trying to remember, I think they did a Horus Heresy one year, and then an other lines one. Then last year it's just got Age of Sigmar, Horus Heresy, and 40k on.
Right.
Because I believe I picked mine up at the Black Library Weekender. I think that's kind of the time of year they release it. So I'm going to be, of course, can't be there because of Blood and Glory, but got friends there, so I'm going to have a bit of a shopping list, because as we talked about with Michael, there's about 5 books that I want from it, and there's usually 1 or 2 little extra bits that I want as well. So I'll have to send them with the shopping list, but keep an eye out. And there's also let's start from the beginning with Black Library and what they're doing at the moment. They've still got the competition to win the Black Library. So if you place an order of £40 or more, you're entered in with a chance to win the entire current Black Library range. So this is all titles being released in September and October, but it's every physical book available through blacklibrary.com and currently in stock. That's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books. I mean, you've only got to go into the Black Library shop in Warhammer World. That's a lot of books. Yeah, so not all of them will be available on the website. I don't think they might have some exclusives there. But either way, so you've got £40 Great British pounds. It's €50. It's 65 American dollars, 80 Canadian dollars. But you can also enter the competition by sending an email to competitions@gwplc.com with the subject line BL competition. And in the body of the email, you just put your name, your contact number, and your full address. But I believe the purchases, you get 1 entry per person per week up until the time they do it. So if you are purchasing, you're getting more entries. But everyone else can enter once anyway, even if you don't purchase. So, I mean, that's fantastic. Go and head over there and enter if you like books at all, because that's a shed load of books. They've also got this Black Library novella series. So there's 10 books they've announced so far. It's a collection of 10, and they've included in that are
Spear of Ultramar and Dreadwing, which are the 2 novellas that are out at the Black Library Weekender that are Horus Heresy stories. But it's
Cool.
it's 10 paperback novellas with a low price point. Basically, a great idea if you want to buy someone a present for Christmas and then into this kind of thing. So that's definitely worth a look at. And there's the 2 Heresy setting novels there as well. So Black Library are still pumping out some stuff. And of course, we've got the releases to come out from Black Library Weekender, and Corax, which should have been out this weekend, is going to be, should have been on pre-order this weekend, is on pre-order next weekend. Forgive me if you can hear my cats running around. They just decided to have a fight with each other in this very room. Magnus is living up to his name by making all the wrong decisions. So Black Library, I say, they've got a lot of cool stuff going on over the next few weeks, and obviously they're going to be putting out information at the Black Library Weekender as well, and Michael will be tweeting stuff, and there's a few other Twitter handles. What I might try and do just before that weekend is collect kind of some of the people who do put out more information. Kenny's going to be there from the Combat Phase podcast. He'll be tweeting out information, but there are other places as well. So we'll try and put that out. But yeah, I think we're pretty much done on what's going on. Any feedback, you can hit us at greg@theimperialtruth.com.
I'm Neil at theimperialtruth.com.
And you can come and check out all our social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You're Neil Paints.
Yes.
I'm at Child of Fang on most of those. And then, of course, the show, Imperial_Truth on Twitter. And just search for The Imperial Truth on Facebook. If you like what we're doing and want to support the show even further, you've got our Patreon as well. You can find the link in the show notes, or visit Patreon and search for The Imperial Truth if you want to give us that extra bit of support. But rather than just run out of things to say, we should probably leave it there. So, Neil, unless you've got anything else you want to add?
Nothing else from me.
Awesome. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.